Just over 100 years ago, Irish whiskey was on top of the world. At one time across this island, there were hundreds of distilleries. At their peak, they produced and exported more whiskey than we do now, over 100 years later. Over a period of decades, independently distilled Irish whiskey was driven to the brink of extinction. We were caught, resting on our laurels. Harsh judgment, perhaps, but from it, we can learn. The story of Irish whiskey is not just about craft and tradition. It is one of perseverance, resilience, and endurance. Slowly at first, and now with a gathering pace, Irish whiskey is on the rise all over the world. We see an incredible opportunity to do things differently, to take Irish whiskey into uncharted territory. We are here for the struggle, for the challenge of crafting Irish whiskey like never before. We are inspired by our history, but we have our sights set firmly on the future.
Hi everyone, Dan here for our evening of whiskey fun. Thank you so much for joining us, taking part in this, in our opportunity to explore Irish whiskey. We are lucky to be joined by 3 fantastic brands over the course of this evening. But before that, I want to start off with a little bit of the admin. 1, drink water. Always have some water with you. I've got my trusty pint with me of water. 2, glassware. Yes, we can be using whiskey tasting glasses. If you haven't got them, do not worry. A wine glass works just as well, as does a tumbler. And for those of you who do want a Summerton tasting glass, check out our Whiskey of the Week email on Thursday. They might be there. But back to this evening. I'm about to introduce our 2 fellow guest hosts who will be joining me for the evening. One you may remember from last time. One is the go-to person for me when I talk to a club member about Irish whiskey, so they had to join us. But let's start with them, and then we will get the event going. The other thing is, between each brand, we will have a quick break for you to recharge your glasses, get some more water, go to the loo. So there will be a little bit of time for that. But let's start by introducing Fee and Toby. Hi, Fee. Hi, Toby.
Hello.
For those who remember from last time, Fee is a cocktail radio host, or a radio host that comments on cocktail and other things. She is one of our first ever members, which introduces me, or one of our original members, longest serving, which introduces me over, or brings me over to Toby, who is our longest serving member and a massive fan of Irish whiskey. His tours of Ireland have pointed me in directions of people to talk to. And he's just always been a good person to share Irish stories and learn a little bit more about Irish whiskey with. So first of all, can I ask Fee for you to introduce yourself a little bit better than I just did?
Thank you so much for not saying I'm one of your oldest members. That's terribly sweet of you this time. I present the Cocktail Hour radio show where I talk about whiskey, cocktails, rum, champagne, etc. I'm also the person who writes the tasting notes for Swelter Spirits, who do rum, gin, whiskey, lots and lots of whiskey. And I just love my whiskey. I do lots of other things. I've got the Quaff blog, which needs updating, but it's great being part of this and just discovering more about Irish whiskey and in great company.
And Toby?
Yeah, so I'm Toby, also known as Whiskey Shared on socials. Also have my own YouTube channel, and I'm just a whiskey enthusiast, which is, I suppose, I was first taken by Irish whiskey right at the start of my whiskey journey, And my first distillery I visited was in Ireland. So yeah, I've got a big love for Irish whiskey and everything they're doing on that great island.
Fantastic. Now, what we're going to do now is we have roughly half an hour per brand as the evening goes on to talk about what's going on with them, taste their delicious whiskey, but also ask questions. Please, in the chat, fire over any questions you might have. The reason we need you to sign in is so that we can moderate it. Those who remember our very first virtual festival where we couldn't have our strong moderating tools, we've learnt, and that's why we have the sign in. So if you've got any questions at all, please fire them in. And at the very end, for 20 minutes or so, we're going to bring everyone back into the room and just discuss Irish whiskey and ask some of your more general questions of them. So if you've got more general questions, please save them for the end and we can ask them to the group as a whole. But on that, Matt, who is doing our tech in the background, can you start our first intro video?
Ireland is no stranger to struggles, and on this whole island, nowhere is this more true than in Connacht. Inspired by the Atlantic, we saw an opportunity to bring a distillery back to a place where whiskey has not been made for 150 years. We were looking for somewhere where doing things your own way was second nature. We chose Connacht because this is where our parents are from, a place where leaving was their only choice, but always with the hope that one day we would come back. We knew there would be challenges along the way. We chose to embrace them, to apply our belief in hard work and our passion for the craft to the making of our whiskey. What is tradition? Tradition is a dedication to a process over generations in order to become masters. What is craft? Craft is the consistent application of that process until it becomes instinct. What is innovation? Innovation is the confidence to drive the whiskey journey further. What sets Connacht Irish whiskey apart is our unique copper pot stills, designed and manufactured in Canada to our master distiller's specifications. Our attention to detail in using only the finest Irish ingredients, and above all, our hard work. And yes, while it is true that hard work can be boring, it is only with discipline, repetition, and focus that we can achieve our goal of crafting a whiskey that is truly born of Connacht. This takes commitment, passion, grit, and experience. This takes a team. Here at Connacht Distillery, we have built a team who are not afraid to do things their own way, who don't just meet the challenge, but who seek it out. Why do we do it this way? Because when we succeed, on that day, it means so much more because we understand its true value. We do it because every step forward is an opportunity to break new ground.
Well, that was quite some introduction and explains a little bit of the background of the first brand we're going to talk to. And I'd like to introduce Ryan, who is joining us from Connacht. All right. Could I ask
everybody
yourself what you do at the distillery, and with yourself in particular, a little bit of your journey of how you got there?
Sure. Thanks for having us, Dan. We really appreciate it. And good to see you, Fee and Toby. Haven't had the chance to meet you in person, but hopefully someday soon. Yeah, I'm the head distiller at Connacht Whiskey, and the company's been here since about 2016. So we're working on 7 years of production. And we make a double distilled whiskey, a single malt whiskey, and a triple distilled whiskey, although that triple distilled hasn't been released yet. It's something we're still working on and being patient for. And we're coming out with a bunch of new one-offs, single casks. We've got gin, we've got vodka. We even have a poaching that people really like, especially here locally. And we've got a bunch of stuff lined up for next year that we're excited to work on and release. And I came to the distillery just about 2 years ago. It'll be January, will be 2 years. And I came from another distillery in Southern California back in the States. You can tell I'm not from here. That wasn't by design. It just happened. And my wife and I were ready for something new, a new challenge, a new experience. And I had been making mostly grain whiskey, some single malt whiskeys, but mostly bourbons, rye whiskeys, things like that in my career before this. So I took it as a big challenge and a new opportunity to come over here to Ireland and learn all the things that I didn't know, or the things that I thought I knew and I was wrong about Irish whiskey. So it's been a year, 2 years full of learning and new experiences and helping the team here grow and really set us up for big successes coming in the next few years.
Oh, fantastic. I'm going to start. I mean, we're going to go into delve in one area. What are the big differences you've found in your previous life distilling versus now in Ireland? And what parts of that do you believe are Irish whiskey? What parts of it believe are specific to your distillery?
Yeah, you know, my first inclination was to say that there's more that's the same than that's different. But the longer I do this, I think the more I can appreciate what Irish whiskey brings and what it offers to the world of whiskey. Like I said, growing up in the industry, only making grain whiskeys or for predominantly making grain whiskeys that were grain in fermentations, grain in distillations, meaning that we didn't sparge and lauter. We didn't separate the grain from the wort. So we had a very different way of thinking about fermentation and how those first stripping runs on the stills were going to go versus this more traditional style, Irish or Scotch style, where you're separating out the wort, fermenting the wort by itself, and then moving over just a relatively clean wash into the first still. It makes how you run the still different. It makes how you watch the fermentations different. And obviously the big change for me was that I had to learn how to run the brew house, because before this, with a grain in mash and getting ready for fermentation, you don't really have to think too much about how you just have to hit your set points for temperature and time. And after that, you're just moving the whole lot over into fermentation and off to the races. And it's really pretty straightforward. So a bit more detail as far as on the brewing side for me to learn about. But that's been a real fun journey for me to go on.
Oh, fantastic. Before we get on to the next bit, one, I'm going to answer your question, Che. Everything is distilled at Connacht that we're trying today. And the first dram, because I know everyone likes us to get something in the glass nice and early, is going to be, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Spirit of the Atlantic.
That's it. So in the video, you might have seen Connacht Batch 1. So that was the first whiskey that the distillery produced all the way from scratch. We, like many folks in Ireland, sourced some whiskeys to start off the distillery. But once, after 4 years, we had our own whiskey ready, and that was Batch 1. Soda, as we call it affectionately around the shop, or Spirit of the Atlantic, is essentially Batch 1, except for 1 year older. That one was 4. This is 5. And then we dropped the proof, the ABV, by just a little bit. Batch 1 was 47%. Spirit of the Atlantic is 44.8%. So if you still see Batch 1 out there, grab it, because that's it. If you liked 47%, there is no more coming. But this one we're really proud of, and we think that it kind of hits the sweet spot for a double distilled single malt whiskey finished in a sherry cask that everyone's going to enjoy.
Can I just ask of the audience, how many people have tried something from Connacht before? And I'm lucky enough to have had a bottle of batch 1. So this is quite nice to know this is an evolution from that bottle, because I was quite impressed. It's kind of the whole reason you're here. So,
good.
I know what they're doing.
Well, it's interesting, and while people knows this, and I'd love to hear what people think and taste it. Really, a big part of my job, they had already come up with batch 1 by the time I got here. It was released in August of 21. I started in January of 22. So really, my job was simply to keep this train moving, make sure that the whiskey that they had already come up with that was really good was still going to be good down the line.
Oh, you're doing a very good job.
Thank you.
And I think if we start off, Toby, what are you getting on the nose? And then Fee will come to you.
Well, it's interesting because, first of all, I was getting quite sort of herbal notes coming through. It was slightly like herbaceous and almost like heavily sort of almost like a rye sort of spice note as well coming through. But there's also some fruitiness there as well, which is quite nice for me. And this will be my first try of Connacht too. So really looking forward to it.
That surprises me. I'm not going to lie. Of anyone, I kind of thought, well, he's going to have had them all already.
Yeah, it's the one I was most looking forward to because I hadn't got around to trying any. But, I was going to ask a quick question. What made you choose this particular ABV for Spirit of the Atlantic?
That was where I was going to go next. Is it wasn't random, it wasn't by chance. We work with Julia Nurney, who is a master blender based in Germany, and she works with us a lot. She comes over to the distillery at least 3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year. We're actually getting ready to see her again in the next week, and we pull and sample 250 casks, all for her to go through. And she and I work together to pick out what's going to be the next set of barrels that go together. And when we were talking about transitioning from batch 1 into Spirit of the Atlantic, we had the conversation, do we leave it the same? Do we go up? Do we go down? What are we going to do with this, what will now become our flagship whiskey moving forward? So there may yet be batch 2s and batch 3s and batch 4s down the road, but Spirit of the Atlantic is going to stay true to form now. And so it was just simply a process of tasting at different strengths and trying to keep that essence of batch 1 going, but at a ABV that we felt was more appropriate for most drinkers.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that.
Nice. And well, it looks like for most this is the first taste, which is exactly what we're here for. To introduce people to new things, try new things, and get to know the people behind these things, like Ryan. And there's something I'd like to ask. This is why I've been looking forward to this since the last tasting session. Fee, what are you getting on this whiskey?
It's lovely. I've actually got 2 glasses. This one's got water, this one hasn't. So every dram we're having, I'm doing with water, without. And by having 12 glasses, I'm going to make a mess, but it just means I can do it at the same time. What's very interesting is the first one, which doesn't have the water, and I know it's a fairly low ABV, but water still opens it up. You've got things like gooseberry, cantaloupe, melon. You've got fries, Turkish delight, lemon and rose, Turkish delight. There's pink grapefruit, coconut, dragon fruit, courgette, which is a new one for me, beeswax polish, pink dental rinse. Does everyone remember that? And paperbacks. Add water. And you're going into autumn. You've got the blackberries on the brambles. You've got daffodils and a mossy bank with dew on it. It's absolutely fabulous. You've got elderberries, glossy holiday brochures, and dandelions, which are just such a gorgeous thing. And I love it. You've got willow, you've got olive wood. There's an awful lot going on. And that's just with a little bit of water.
Fee, can you say all that again? I wasn't writing. I need to write all that down. That was good.
It's all written down. Don't worry. I've been happily typing it out. But there's so much. You've also got raspberry sorbet. You've got petrichor. There's a little hint of dunnage as well. It's just got that autumnal feel to it, just with that bit of water. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
Well, and that'll be a really good segue into our second tasting. So keep that note in mind. But for, all of that, and the thing that comes through the most when I'm just talking to people who've tried it for the first time, who aren't necessarily big whiskey drinkers, is we talk a lot about the fruit. The fruit note is big on this one. And Julia in particular brought this one up to me, and I totally bought into it, is this note of a pear skin. We keep, ever since she said it, I can't get rid of it in my head. And so I keep getting it. Excuse me. And then, of course, because I'm intimately familiar with the smell of the distillery and of our brew house and the malt that we work with, it just, I'm hit in the face with it every time I go back to this whiskey. It just smells like going to work, really.
Oh, that sounds lovely. And I'm liking Eric's description. This is it tastes like a hot day at the horse races. I'm loving this. Just so everyone knows, I didn't want to say too much, but anyone who remembers the last tasting, there's a reason Fee's back. We were meant to have moving both guest hosts, but I just love the way that Fee experiences whiskey. And it's something that gets brought up a lot in the club, and even with some friends of mine talk about whiskey is, oh, I don't get what you get out of it. I was like, don't worry, we all get different things. We all have different points. And I don't get as much as Fee does, but that's the beauty of it. Fee, when I listen to Fee, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. And as Nick says, no one can describe it like Fee.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much. We have a very good question in the private chat from one of the later hosts that brands are coming on. What's the fermentation regime?
That's a great question. Yeah. So it's been evolving because our brew house is such that that's not the bottleneck for our facility. It's actually in fermentation. So we have to get a little creative with how we handle this. So we've done everything from low starting temperatures to high starting temperatures, different pitch rates. We've done and then we've done different time as well. So obviously those are the main inputs that you can control after you leave the brew house. And we've done everything from just over 48 hours up to 6 days. And we're seeing the best results in the 4 to 5 day fermentation time. So that's kind of where we're trying to shoot for. So if we averaged 4 days, I'd be happy moving forward.
Oh, fantastic. I like getting stuff like that. So you're still learning. You're a young distillery and you're growing and you're still developing. So you're honing that down. What are the other areas that you're experimenting with at the moment? And what ones have you already put to bed?
Yeah, so I did mention that there's some stuff coming, and I think we get to try one of those things, one of our first releases of those experimental options coming up here, which I'm really excited to hear about what people have to say, because we only have a very little bit of this left. And so we're trying to see what people think about it. But we've got a load of stuff in the warehouse, as you might imagine. We've got everything from rum casks, tequila casks. We've got some wine casks that are finishing really, really well. And that could be something we see in 2024 because it's done so well. And Pinot, some beer, a collaboration that we did locally that we haven't figured out how to release it yet, but we're working on. But we do obviously focus heavily on our standard cask profiles, which for us are ex-American bourbon that we're filling for the first time for a minimum of 3 years, but typically 4 and 5 years at this point. That just grows with us as we grow. And then like this whiskey that you're trying here is finished in Oloroso sherry, big sherry butts. We've also feathered in some 225 liter sherry casks, which offer a totally different intensity when it comes to that sherry. We've got some other casks that were specialty casks that we're working on and just doing a few test runs with. So, we'd love it if we could make money and just do the experiments. But so we have to be a little careful with that and not go overboard. But it's really exciting to see that stuff as it develops. And malt whiskey and second use barrels or first fill X whatever barrels take more time. They just take more time to develop and show what they're going to do. I'm used to coming from the States where it's virgin casks and you get a shock of color, a shock of extraction, and really, really fun and wonderful flavors after just 2 years, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years. You can have amazing whiskeys. So it's been interesting to see where that tipping point is for our whiskey, when it starts to turn the corner and turn into something that is new and unique for us.
Oh, fantastic. And do you have other experiments that you're thinking, I know what I want to do? We can't do this at the moment. We've got what we're doing. As you say, you can't just experiment. You've got to put stuff out. You're going, there's this thing in the future that I really want to play with. I don't know where it's going to go, but we've got to hold this one for down the line. Have you got something in mind for that?
Well, I'm afraid it's not a sexy answer, but it's my best answer because it's new to me, which is making a pot still whiskey. Connacht Whiskey hasn't made a pot still whiskey yet. So that's something we really want to do. And it's simply come down to a matter of when can we fit it into our production schedule, because we have a certain demand that we're trying to meet to get this double distilled and triple distilled whiskey out there. So it's when do you get to put in those other things and turn it, because you obviously have to have a little time to develop that and see how it's going to go and have some tolerance for, trial and error. So I know that's something that a lot of people in Ireland are doing, and they're doing it really well, but we haven't done it yet. So that's one thing I really would like to do.
Fantastic.
Can I just ask about the pot still? What would your recipe be?
We haven't done it yet, Toby, so I don't know exactly.
Have you got any thoughts on where you might go with it, or what you might like to do?
Yeah, coming from a grain background, a non-malted background, I have a big appreciation for what grain whiskeys and grain can do in a whiskey. So obviously I want to focus on oats, probably with a bit, we'll have the minimum required amount of malted barley. I would like to do a little bit of unmalted barley and some oats. I think that's where I'd like to start it.
Nice.
Is there a grain that you'd like to see, or even if it's a form of grain that you'd like to see brought over from America? You think it would add to the diversity, complexity, just do something good?
It's an easy answer for me because my favorite whiskey that I've ever made was a rye whiskey. So it's rye. Rye, I just love what rye does. I love the spicy notes, the spicy characteristics that rye brings, the complexity, the way that it works with other grains, other raw grains, and in some cases malt. I'm not a huge fan of malted rye, but raw rye with other grains like wheat and corn or maize, I really like what they do.
I'm going to say we're probably about time we need to start pouring our second dram. We don't need to jump into it yet, but give it a second. For those of you with one glass, I'd say wash it out with water, and this is what we're going to be drinking. It's the distillery exclusive. Just so everyone sees, if you're on the Summerton page, we have a link to all of the bottles that we're tasting, where to purchase them from. You'll see that the link to where to purchase this from is a map of how you get to the distillery, because that's where you purchase it from. We are incredibly lucky to be able to taste something that you can't get anywhere else apart from the distillery. And that's what we're going on now. And can you share, Ryan, a little bit more? I know you've already discussed a bit of it, but how this one came about, what's in it? I know a fair bit about it, and you might, and the bottle show gave a little bit more. Yeah.
Well, no, we're not trying to pull a fast one on people, but this was something we really wanted to share with folks to get your feedback on, but also to get people excited. We really, of course, want people to come to the distillery. That's why we made a distillery exclusive, to say, if you come to Mayo, County Mayo, out here in the West, you get to try something you can't get anywhere else in the world. So that's really important about this one. But we do want as many people to try it as possible. So we were glad to be able to get you guys some. You can tell, I don't know if people are able to see it on the website, but it is a single cask release, cask number 115. That is a 225 liter sherry cask. Thus, that color that you're getting there, that we don't see on our regular, which is more of a straw color, because that one's a single cask, and the whiskey that was in there spent the final years of its life all together married in that one single cask. So we get lots of extraction, we get lots of color, we get lots of intensity on flavor. The ABV is a bit higher, 51.7. Not as high as you might think, but it is over 5 years old. And so the ABV did drop a lot for this one. But I think it was worth it because what came out, what Fee was saying makes me think about this whiskey, about those fall notes. It kind of takes the spirit of the Atlantic and then takes it to its extreme on the sherry side and on the character side.
I'm seeing your burnt caramel, Toby. I'm getting kind of leather, like almost like saddle leather with caramel above it. I'm not going any further than that because I know what Fee will be like. She'll tell me the person's name that sat on it and what they ate for breakfast.
No, that's not fair. I was going to tell you the horse's name.
Damn it.
And it
That's
came in second,
amazing.
but this is fabulous.
Mm.
You know those German biscuits they do at Christmas? Not Lebkuchen, but I'm not going to pronounce this properly.
Stonnen?
No, it's the Pfeffernusse.
Pfeffernusse.
So they're sort of
I've heard
aniseed
that.
ginger with this creamy white thin cover, and it's just like that. You've also got German pretzels in there. And do you remember Gentleman's Relish?
I used to sell Gentleman's Relish. Look,
It's
Joe,
this.
Gentleman's Relish.
it's a anchovy-based paste.
But so
that
much nicer
is-
than that sounds.
Yeah, it was. When I first started selling
I
it,
hope
it was
so.
awful. And by the end, I liked anchovies. But yeah, it's like 250, 300-year-old breakfast product that no one
Now,
has.
we weren't trying to make a holiday release, but people have said to us, and the girls in the visitor center call it Christmas in a glass.
It is Christmas. It's a German Christmas, which is even better because they just
Oh,
invented
you're right.
so many of our traditions. There's a bit of truffle in there as well. I'm loving it. And do you remember
Someone said
Mr.
treacle.
Pippin's coconut macaroons?
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
So yeah, Kez, you're right. I've been trying to figure out. We've got to do some club tours, and I know Scotland should be one of them, but Ireland is definitely an area, a whole region that we could spend weeks doing. And now we know we've got to go over to the far side and find that.
Just drive right across the country and run it into the water. You'll find us.
But this show, the nice thing about this is that we know you're going to go to a great place. Now you know you're going to taste great whiskey. This has to be almost like a tourist video of why aren't you coming over quite soon? Oh, that's gorgeous. How you find it, Tobes? Or you writing that one down? Sorry.
Yeah. It's well, as I just posted, it doesn't give it anywhere near the same experience on the nose as it does the palate. It's quite deceptive on the nose for me. And then you take a sip of it and it's like, bam. It's like, yeah, it's as much sherry as you could possibly have in a whiskey.
We really squeezed that barrel for everything it was worth.
And for me, I love that fruitiness. It's sweet, but not too sweet. There's a slight sort of like baking spices in there as well. It really is, it really is like Christmas in a glass. I couldn't see myself drinking this in summer, but it would mean it'd last longer because I could save it for when it's cold and miserable outside. So perfect for now.
Can I just check James's comment? Jack Charlton used to fish for salmon in front of the distillery. Is that Connacht Distillery?
Well, very likely. We're the only distillery on the River Moy, which is a world-famous salmon fishing river. And I should send you a picture, but if I'm standing facing our still, standing at the still, and if I just look left like that, I'm looking right out onto the river.
Oh, that's got I'm a Sheffield Wednesday fan, so that's got a little added. He managed us for a little while in the days where we used to know what a ball was and how to kick it in a direction. Things have changed, but wow, so there's more to do. Like you, Toby, I've got the same. Like the nose was fantastic, and then I put it, and then you taste it, and it's a whole new level of depth after that,
different.
in a great way.
It's a lot spicier. And you've got mushroom relish, which I love. You've got Worcester sauce. It's got lots of prickly spices. It's absolutely wonderful. You add water and you get Yorkie bar, which apparently is just for men. And I just love it. Dark chocolate and robe, ginger, bakewell tart, salted caramel coffee, which I had for breakfast this morning, Turkish coffee, and that wonderful rum and raisin fudge, which you get with really good sherry casks.
Yeah. But isn't it amazing to see what happens? This is the same liquid, you know, it's the same juice going in. It's just, this is what casks and a maturation program can do.
It's a lot meatier. There's even Bovril in there.
Yeah.
I definitely am getting a slight meaty tone on the finish. But it is interesting because if I didn't have these side by side, I probably wouldn't realise this was from the same distillery. But because you can have them side by side, you can pick up the nuances that's still in there, and the sherry hasn't totally got rid of them. So the fact that, you know, the distillery character is still present, it's really good.
I'm so impressed with that.
Could I ask a question, please?
Please.
Which club member is going to go across to the distillery to buy us bottles, please?
We'll hold a few. Guys, there's only about 90 left. I didn't check today, but there's only about 90 left from this barrel of over 300 because it was a 225 liter. So just say it.
Well, as long as you save 89 for us, we'll be fine.
Yeah, and you're
we'll be happy to.
There's another barrel just like this, isn't there? Just in case.
I can't say that. I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know.
This is our Christmas bottle.
Oh, I would not be unhappy with this at all. This would be perfect for Christmas.
I was going to say there wouldn't be enough bottles in the cask, would there?
No, we just have to do a little bit of a store, a little go through the storeroom. But yeah, this is Christmas in a glass. Well,
and
we've got Mel.
Sorry,
Mel's
you can have more than one membership.
Yeah,
I have two. My dog had a membership, so if you do want an extra club bottle, which sounds like this is going to happen one day, join up again.
Yeah.
This is how we're going to grow the club. Everyone just get 2 memberships. Let's not tell anyone about it. It's a private club.
Get it for your dog.
And then looking at the future. So we're seeing fantastic evolution. Just for me, I know I've got one step before I had batch 1, and I can taste the evolution into soda. And this is a whole deeper level of almost funk on top of that. Where do you see the next 2 or 3 steps of what you're going to be focusing on flavor-wise or cask-wise going forward?
Yeah, I can confidently say that the double distilled malt will continue to age. You know, we wouldn't have released it at 4 years if we weren't happy with it, and we were, and it was a really great whiskey coming out at 47% at 4 years. But when I say 5 years is in the bottle now, that's the bottom end. That's the youngest whiskey in that bottle. So I know it's going to go another couple of years at least. Do we get to 8, 10, 12? I don't know yet. When do we start putting an age statement on it, if we ever do? So these are some of the questions that we kind of bat around when we have the free time to think about that. But right now, the focus is on increasing capacity, increasing our production, meeting the demand that's out there for Irish whiskey, both here in Ireland and abroad. Obviously, the States is a big market for us. We're doing really well and doing a lot of fun things in Germany. Germans love Irish whiskey. That's the big takeaway that I've learned over the last 2 years. They can't get enough of it. Some specialty releases for other markets, but it's really about how do we keep making this whiskey time and again just as good as it is now?
I like that. I'm happy with what we've got.
Consistency is the key for keeping people along for the journey.
And if you could pick one cask from everything you've tasted so far in the warehouse, which one is it?
Oh man, that's a good one. So I'll do a curveball. There's probably something else if I thought about it long enough, but there's a curveball. We did a whiskey that we put for just about 4 weeks into an small, like 125 liter Lafroig cask, Scotch whiskey. So a smoky, peaty one. And in that short period of time, it sucked up those phenols. Like I couldn't have imagined this. And it came out better than I thought it was going to be. And we have a plan for how to deal with this whiskey, and I'm not a huge smoky guy, peaty guy, but this one just really worked. And so right now that's kind of what I'm jamming on.
So will you let us know when that becomes the next distillery exclusive? Because we've got JB going this time round, and we've got to find out who's flying past the next time round to pick up on some of this.
Yep. We plan to keep coming. So that distillery exclusive label is going to stick around. So this part here will just change. You'll get a new bottle, you get a new experience, all that kind of stuff.
The Lefroy
Perfect.
one sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it was more than I expected. It was really interesting.
I can see that going with this well, either one, but particularly distillery exclusive, the heavy sherry, a bit of pip. Oh, that would go well. But we're going to have to start wrapping it up. Fee, Toby, do you have any last questions before we have to say thank you to Ryan?
How much is the distillery exclusive, please?
Oh boy, you had to ask that
I'm
question.
sorry to be
didn't
so
you?
crass, but
No.
Under £62. It's 61 something. It's on that for anyone on the main Summerton page. If you scroll down, you've got a link to every single bottle that we're tasting. The Spirit of the Atlantic, that's to purchase. Whereas the distillery exclusive, as you'll see, as I said before, it's your map and directions of how to get to the distillery, which, based on this tasting, we can all highly recommend. So thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, sharing your story, a bit about the distillery and this delicious whiskey. And look forward to chatting to you again. If you can come back in a little bit over an hour, we can just chat in general after a couple more drams about what we see is going on in front of us and what the fun things we have to look forward to in Irish whiskey.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thanks very much.
You, Ryan.
Thank
We're
you.
now going to go to a quick 3-minute break. Anyone who wants to go to loo, get some water, you've got 3 minutes, and then we're going again. See you in a bit.
Boann Distillery is located in the historic Boyne Valley in Ireland. This ancient land is home to 5,000 years of myth and legend. From the goddess of the River Boyne, we take our name. From the goodness of the Boyne Valley, we take our ingredients. The Boyne River flows through our fertile lands that give us our native barley and our deep well water for our unique whiskies. Boann Distillery is located in the port town of Drogheda in County Meath. Drogheda is more than just a passing link to distilling, as there were once 18 distilleries in the town, the last silencing its stills in the late 1850s. The first spirits flowing through the Boann copper pot stills marked a return to distilling to Drogheda after 160 years. It has always been our family dream to craft and distill our own whiskies. Our state-of-the-art distillery, our custom copper handmade pot stills, and our access to the best casks to mature our spirit ensure that we will make a unique whisky of great provenance with a real sense of place. Every bottle will tell a story, the story of our land, our people, and our family.
Hi everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a nice break, had some water. We're now to be joined by Stephen, who will share what he does with Boann, and we're going to enjoy the Whistler. Those who are Whiskey Pioneer members will remember, I believe it was our June delivery of Mosaic, and we're very lucky to be doing more with the Whistler and trying more of their fantastic range. And that's all thanks to this lovely person here, Stephen.
Hey everybody, how are things?
Very well. Can you share a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are now, and a little bit about the distillery, please? Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Stephen Randalls. I'm one of the export sales managers at Boann Distillery. So my day-to-day job would involve kind of working with and liaising with our different import partners from all over the world. So we're working in about 70 or 80 markets worldwide now at the moment. So I'm kept quite busy from Togo to Tasmania. They're looking for Irish whiskey everywhere, which is a testament to the industry and where we're at the moment. So I've been in the industry probably about 8 or 9 years now at this stage. I was working for different craft Irish whiskey companies, one in the United States for 2 years. Then I worked for a different craft Irish spirits company back here in Ireland. I actually co-created a single malt Irish whiskey while I was with that company, quite an innovative, creative single malt Irish whiskey. And then about 18 months ago, I joined the family-run and family-operated Boann Distillery, located in the Boyne Valley in Drogheda, where we produce, I suppose, the beautiful Whistler Irish whiskey range that we're going to be tasted here today. So it's an amazing distillery that it is, as I mentioned, not just family-owned, but family-run. So it's the Cooney family that actually run the distillery. And it's Pat Cooney. He is the managing director and CEO. He's a 76-year-old wily businessman who's been around the block. He's been in the Irish drinks industry for about 45 years now at this stage. He's actually a champion whistler on the island of Ireland, and that's the man our whiskey is actually named after. But it is him, his wife Marie, or Sunshine as he affectionately knows her, his 3 sons, Peter, Paddy and James, and then his 2 daughters, Sally Ann and Celestine, that actually run the distillery on a day-to-day basis. I'm one of the only members of senior management inside the distillery that actually isn't a member of the family. So if my viewpoint goes against that of the family in the team meetings in the distillery, it can be quite interesting, to say the least. But I think they like that. They like the outside perspective and someone else kind of standing up to them and getting their viewpoint across. So we do some really unique and innovative things. We've got our Boann single pot still Irish whiskey, and then we've got our Whistler range of Irish whiskies, which is kind of a creative and unique and innovative range of single malts, single grains, blended malts, blended grains, age statements, and unique cask finishes.
Fantastic. And which of the two would you recommend we start with this evening?
I'd highly recommend starting with the stout cask. This time of year is perfect season for the stout cask finish. So this is probably my favorite Whistler in the Whistler range, and it's a perfect kind of winter warmer. I normally follow it up. It kind of has a beautiful kind of a note to it that makes it perfect to follow up maybe a peated whiskey afterwards. But this is a great one to start you off when you get home from work on a cold, wet, windy evening. This one's absolutely gorgeous. Do you want me to jump into the whiskey, or do you want to have more of a chat beforehand?
First of all, I'd just like to know a little bit more of. I love the name, where the name the Whistler comes from. Just learned that. That's pretty cool. But can you just explain a little bit more how the Whistler relates to Boann, and how the liquids will be different.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the Whistler will be single malts, single grains, blended malts, age statements, and unique cask finishes. So about 75% of what we distill at our distillery would be high-end luxury premium mixed mash bill single pot still. The other 25% would be single malt. So the malt component of the Whistler will be 100% malt from our own distillery. Up until now, we've been sourcing different liquids from different distilleries all across the island of Ireland for the Whistler range. So the Cooney family, they've been involved in the Irish drinks industry for about 45 years. Anything you can bottle or drink, the Cooneys have had a hand in at some stage. And they previously were the biggest importer of wine, beer, and spirits onto the island of Ireland. So from that time, they have fantastic relationships, I suppose, with different wine, beer, and spirit producers all over the world. And we can get our hands on some really unique cask types. As well as that, they would have great purchasing power here on the island of Ireland from the relationships that they would have established with the distilleries on the island from their times as Gleeson Wholesale. And from that, we can source from pretty much nearly all of the distilleries on the island of Ireland that would have been operational, I suppose, prior to maybe 5 years ago. There's a lot of the newer distilleries on the island that we're not working with as of yet. So the Whistler up until this point would have been whiskey sourced from multiple distilleries on the island of Ireland, brought to our facility, casks sourced from all over the world, and then there would be no liquid that we wouldn't have worked with for a minimum of 2 to 3 years before it's actually put into cask. To give you an example, the stout cask that you're drinking is liquid from 3 different distilleries here on the island of Ireland. It's 50% wheat whiskey, which is sourced from a distillery in the southwest of the country. It's 35% single malt, sourced from a distillery in the Midlands, and then it's 15% single grain, sourced from a distillery in the northeast of the country. And these have all been combined together and finished in unique imperial stout casks that we would have sourced ourselves through our own relationships with different breweries here on the island of Ireland. So you literally have 4 different, I suppose, drinks companies coming together, and then the 5th company being ourselves, the manufacturer, putting it all together. So up until this point, the liquid has been 100% sourced, but as of January onwards, our own malt component will be going to the Whistler range of Irish whiskies, and the Whistler would stay in the portfolio. As of June 2024, we'll be launching Boann single pot still, and as I mentioned, that will be mixed mash bill, luxury, premium, high-end single pot still whiskey, and that will all come out under the Boann range. Boann will only be single pot still. The Whistler will never be single pot still. It will be single malt, single grains, blended malts.
And I think everyone in the chat should just put a little bit of pressure on Stephen that we do need a Boann club bottle in the future. If this is how it's coming across, just
Dan's already doing a very good job of that.
yeah, a bit of peer pressure. If we can get a few people in the chat just constantly, where's our bottle? I think that will help.
Might help, yeah.
But yeah, let's get on to this one, Tobes. How are you? Pickled onion kind of finish. Oh, right, that.
Yeah, for me, there's lots of chocolate on the nose, lots of chocolate on the palate, which is always good with a stout cask. I think it adds a nice creaminess, and it's very sort of velvety as well on the palate. It's one of those sort of drams that I think works really well with a beer if you've got a beer to hand as well. But even without, I think this. I don't know, the velvety, creamy texture along with that sort of slightly spicy, chocolatey note is lovely.
It's lovely. We've got a question. I don't know if you're allowed to share this. Which brewery is the stout cask from?
So I think the picture you're sharing is actually batch 2, but I believe the liquid that you actually got was batch 3. So basically every batch is with a different brewery. So we used to actually have a brewery in our distillery as well. It was actually one of the biggest independent breweries on the island of Ireland, with world's best awards to our name. But unfortunately, we found it much harder to export beer off the island of Ireland than we do craft Irish whiskey. So it started from kind of that love affair that we had with beer when we had our own brewery on site. The first batch was with beer casks from our own Boyne Brewhouse brewery. But since that, every batch is actually with a different craft beer brewery using a different imperial stout. Batch 3 is actually with, I don't know if you can see it there, Loch Gill Brewing Company over on the west coast of Ireland. So every year, right about now, they release their winter edition Imperial Stout cask finishes, which are absolutely wonderful beers. I'd highly recommend anyone to go out and try source some of those beers if they can get their hands on them. So we actually took their Imperial Stout casks last year and aged this whiskey in it for about 8 to 9 months. Now, one thing that we have found with stout casks is that stout doesn't permeate wood quite as well as the likes of an Oloroso sherry or a Marsala actually does. It doesn't penetrate very deep into the wood. It only kind of gets quite surface level in the actual wood itself. Hence, you might have heard the blend that I mentioned a second ago. With the Imperial Stout cask finish here, what we actually did was we created a blend that in itself had quite a unique stout character to it. The 50% wheat whiskey that we actually use in the blend here is a very unique whiskey in that it doesn't really fall into the single malt or single grain category. It's wheat distilled on a copper pot still, but not necessarily malted wheat. And it's quite a unique, bitter, rambunctious whiskey in its own right. You probably couldn't release it as it is. Only people, whiskey anoraks like myself, maybe and Toby, would probably drink it. But when you blend it with that 30% or 35% single malt, that 35% single malt that we chose was a really, really creamy single malt, almost like the creaminess you get on the head of a pint of Guinness. And then we used quite a sweet single grain with quite a lot of chocolate character to it to dial up those kind of chocolate flavors. So if you were to taste this blend before it even went into these Imperial Stout casks, you'd actually think it was almost a stout cask finish already. It has quite a lot of that, unique stout character. And then it spends, as I said, 8 to 9 months in those big Imperial Stout casks from Lochiel Brewery on the west coast of Ireland. And as I said, it's quite I always say it's quite a rambunctious whiskey. There's a lot going on. It's bitter, it's chocolatey, it's fudgy, there's lactose character in there. It's a lot of fun.
I was going to ask Fee for her notes, but I think that's coming, but we'll go for that in a minute. You say that each year is a different cask. Do you notice a big impact from the cask? Do you change the recipe slightly to deal potentially with the different flavors you're going to get out of it? Or do you go in with the same recipe and try and go in a slightly different direction each time?
Up until this point, it's been the same recipe. Now, this batch 3 is actually the last batch where this will be the Imperial Stout cask finish. We've actually decided with this particular product to open it up to be the Whistler craft beer cask finish. And what that does is it opens us up to an awful lot more different beers from all over the world. So the first 3 batches were just independently with Irish craft breweries. But then we started from all of the things we were doing with the Whistler brand and the expansion of the Whistler brand worldwide. Luckily, we're now being approached by wonderful craft beer breweries from all over the world who are saying, hey, would you like to collaborate? So we decided to move to a craft beer cask finish. I can let slip that the next batch will be finished in a Doppelbock rye cask, which will be quite unique. And we have changed the recipe, hoping to kind of accentuate and elevate the flavors that are in those Doppelbock rye casks. But we're already in touch with the likes of some Belgian Trappist monks to see if we can get some casks from them. And different breweries from all over the world making wonderful different styles of beer. So this product, it's a nightmare from a logistics perspective. If you're a retail buyer in a large multinational store, the last thing you want to hear is that every single release is going to be a different batch and is going to be finished in a different cask type. You want something consistent. But this is us kind of, I suppose, bringing our love from the craft beer world into the craft whiskey world.
And we've got Fee. Can you share with us what you're getting on this, please?
Apart from the Wi-Fi issues, absolutely loving it. It's really funky. You've got some dunnage, you've got some lanolin, as in lamb's wool, Irish coffee, vintage handbag, Army and Navy sweets, which I adore, dark chocolate coffee beans, you've got cherry lips, you've got floral gums. It's very earthy. You've got a rare steak in there, Jamaica ginger cake, and then when you add water, the Imperial Stout is a lot more dominant. You've got hazelnut cannoli, which I adore, Bon Maman salted caramel dessert. It's making me very hungry. Pain au chocolat, galaxy, licorice fudge. It's just beautifully balanced. You've got some Dutch coffee sweets, which apparently I don't pronounce properly, hoppers, and a tin of butterscotch travel sweets. Absolutely love it.
Love it. I was reading everything about. I'm getting what Fee's saying. I'm getting like Marmite now is something I'm getting based on what Chandra's written.
I'm really pleased I didn't get the Marmite. Not a fan.
Fee, I need you to write all of
I'm
our
getting
tasting
in the
notes now.
Marmite.
Will do.
Yeah, Fee is the person that should write notes for every single brand. Forget
was
the
incredible.
SMWS craziness. Let's actually have it. It's actually relevant crazy. Not that crazy's bad. Hang on, I'm just going to stop talking.
Crazy is positive.
Yeah, in an
The thing is, it
amazing way.
doesn't matter if you don't get it, as long as you get certain things. Some people just sniff this and think it's whiskey. Do I like it? Do I not? That's absolutely fine.
It's the best way. It's the number one question you've got. Do I like it or do I not? The rest
Exactly.
is it.
Would I buy it? Would I not?
And I also like that I'm now getting Mascherino cherry on there where I wasn't before.
I've got the cherry.
Stephen, I was going to ask, have you done a barrel swap in reverse with the craft beer companies, so they can basically age their beer in your whiskey cask?
Yeah, that's how it started. So we gave them an ex-Oloroso sherry cask that we'd used to finish our whiskey in. They aged their beer in it initially, and then we took that back, and that was the first batch we did with Lochgill. There's multiple different beers actually in this batch. Some that have been in the Lochgill casks for 12 months, some that have been in for 8 or 9 months. But yeah, they initially had those casks at first, and then we took the casks back.
And what was the beer like? Did it go down well?
Absolutely incredible. Yeah. So it was a beer. They had pecan and vanilla infused in the beer. Now that was infused afterwards. So the Imperial Stout, it was a 12.5 rasper of a stout, aged in the Oloroso sherry casks for over a year, and then they enhanced it with pecan and vanilla afterwards, and it was absolutely gorgeous. Now you could only drink one of them at 12.5%. It's a little pocket rocket that will get you going for the evening. But every year, yeah, they do a release every year, and I watch out for it every year. Prior to us even working with them from a cask perspective, I think they're one of the best Imperial Stout annual releases that come out.
Sounds interesting.
For future bits, we know obviously Mosaic was the Masala Cask single grain. We've got PX I Love You single malt coming up in a minute. We've got the Imperial Stout that's going to change into the craft beer. Are there other Whistler styles and flavors that you're working on at the moment that you're thinking this is going to be something? Not the liqueur like the honey, which is a whole new other level of deliciousness. But what are there things you're crafting at the moment? We've got to find a way of fitting this into the range.
Yeah, like that's one of the magical things about working for an independent family-run company. There's no red tape. There's no kind of democratic bureaucracy. Like everyone who works in the distillery, from Pat, right down to the distillers, we're all absolute whiskey nuts. And we have a very privileged job. we get sent, wonderful different fortified wines and beers and different wines and champagnes and even everything from all over the world on a regular basis from companies looking to collaborate with us. And when we taste something truly spectacular, we can act on that very quickly. We can say, wow, this is really unique. What spirit type could we finish in one of these casks to create, an absolutely wonderful whiskey? And when that happens, it happens very, very quickly. Like it can happen within 2 to 3 months of tasting something. We can have those casks sourced on the island of Ireland, liquid in the cask, and our experiment has come to fruition. And while it's aging, then we're trying to come up with, a unique marketing perspective and unique name and kind of what color we're going to utilize to kind of accentuate and elevate and kind of speak for the flavors in the actual liquid that we're developing. So we act quickly, we move fast, we're constantly innovating, we're constantly creating. It's almost like a bunch of whiskey fanatics have just been given the keys to a distillery and been told to go wild. That's what it actually feels like working in the distillery on a day-to-day basis, because we're just constantly coming up with new different variations and creations. This year we released already 3 new Whistler whiskies. We had our Whistler Dark Symphony, our Whistler 10-year-old French Oak, and we had our Whistler 16-year-old Pale Apertado. We're hoping to potentially squeeze in one more release this year, although it's looking like it'll probably move over into next year. I can confirm that would be an absolutely beautiful 21-year-old single malt Irish whiskey finished in a Madeira cask with a 20-year-old bottle of Madeira side by side in a beautiful wooden gift pack. But already next year, we've got 4 different Whistler Irish whiskies lined up. One of the ones that I'm the most excited about, and I'm probably giving away too much, I'll get a a kick in the shin tomorrow from across the desk from one of the directors. But we have a beautiful blended grain that's actually finished in port casks, ruby port casks. So it's 3 different grains from 3 different distilleries on the island of Ireland, blended together and finished in these ruby port casks. And they're some of the most dramatic looking casks I've ever seen, because if you've ever seen a ruby port cask, right around the bung, there's almost like this explosion of red port coming out. It looks like it's someone's after being stabbed in a movie and blood is just kind of seeping out of them. So they look incredibly dramatic, but already the color and the flavor profile that we're actually getting in that blended grain is absolutely incredible. So yeah, so no, it's a real hotbed of innovation inside in the distillery. We're constantly tasting, we're constantly creating. We're just, as I said, whiskey nuts, whiskey fanatics, and we're just trying to create, I suppose, the most unique, most flavoursome, most innovative, most creative whiskies that we can. We try to push the boundaries. We try to do things that not many other Irish whiskey companies are doing, and we really enjoy what we're doing, and we're hoping that our consumers will kind of come on that journey with us and enjoy the whiskies as much as we do.
Yeah, I agree with the comment. It does sound like your blended grain does sound like a perfect club bottle, by the way.
There you go.
And I have a question based on what Sinclair has said, because I do really like the sound of adding this to some mint sauce at Christmas. Are there any foods that you would add any of your whiskies to enhance it? We've got like Boutique Dave that has his little bit of whiskey with his porridge every morning. Sinclair going for mint sauce and this at Christmas. Which one of yours have you thought would go really well with your gravy?
I'm actually going to hone in on the Whistler Stout here, because I mentioned this is my favorite whiskey in our portfolio, and I actually do love this time of year, because when it's chilly and it's cold and it's wet and it's miserable outside, you don't feel bad coming home in the evening and just putting the feet up and relaxing. And if I've had a long day at work, I love coming home. I pour myself a dram of the Whistler Imperial Stout. I take out a nice bar of dark chocolate, something kind of 70 to 85%, and then I'll pour myself a glass of stout, and I'll pair the stout, the whiskey, and the dark chocolate together, and I am just in seventh heaven at that stage. So that would be my perfect food pairing for any of the whiskies in the portfolio, is the Whistler Imperial Stout with a bit of dark chocolate that really just amplifies all of those bitter coffee cacao notes that are already inside there. But there's multiple whiskies in our portfolio. Like we have a Whistler called the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky. It's a blended malt, so 3 different single malts from 3 different distilleries blended together and then finished in a Peat and Lefroy quarter cask. And the smokiness you get from that Lefroy quarter cask in the summer, for me, when I'm barbecuing with some meats, just works and elevates the meat flavors, especially kind of a good flame grilled steak on the barbecue with the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky. Again, I'm in seventh heaven with that one as well. So there's different ones, there's different whiskies in the portfolio that I pair with different things. So it depends on the time of year, depends on what I'm eating, depends where I am. But I always say there's a Whistler for every occasion.
Can I just ask, have you ever turned the Good, the Bad, and the Smoky into Dog's Nose cocktail? So you pour a dram of it into a pint or half a pint of stout. Dog's Nose is a Tudor cocktail, and it's whiskey.
I've never done that.
Gin or rum with a dark beer or a stout, but that just sounds, with the Lefroy cask, particularly the quarter cask, that would be amazing with a really good stout.
I'm going to do that later on tonight.
Thank you. It's going to be worth it. It's going to be fabulous.
And on the Whistler for every occasion, it's about time that we pour the PX I Love You and get sniffing as we're chatting.
Amazing.
Sounds
so
like
the
a declaration then.
The PX I Love You was actually meant to be almost like an anti-Valentine's kind of more masculine take on love. It's meant to be kind of like an evocative interpretation there. You just had the label up on the screen of Cupid's arrows piercing the heart of the modern day whiskey lover as he falls in love with Pedro Jimenez. And if you look in and zoom in on the heart, there's like treacle dripping from the heart, and that treacle is the Pedro Jimenez sherry trickling from the whiskey lover's heart. But behind all of that, with the name PX I Love You, it's just become associated with the movie PS I Love You and the very roguish looking Gerald Butler, and it's become the #1 Valentine's Day whiskey across Ireland and in a lot of our markets worldwide. which it wasn't meant to be, but I can see why it's worked that way, and it's doing very well for us from a sales perspective. But this is probably the whiskey that we're the most renowned for across the world, and it just goes to show that marketing does actually work. People see this in shops and they don't even understand what Pedro Jimenez sherry is, and automatically they're drawn to it. They want to buy it, they want to try it, and then when they try it, they're really impressed. So this is probably our most synonymous Whistler Irish whiskey. So we do really champion Pedro Jimenez sherry at our distillery. You know, an awful lot of Irish whiskey up until this point has been finished in Oloroso, but Pedro Jimenez, when they're making the Pedro Jimenez sherry, you know, they actually dry out the grape into a raisinous style form. So then when they actually hand crush the grapes, they actually bring out more of a syrup style texture to the actual liquid. I actually find Pedro Jimenez sherry by itself quite difficult to drink, but I pour it on my desserts. It's absolutely wonderful. But when you finish an Irish whiskey in a Pedro Jimenez sherry style cask, rather than those bigger, darker, raisinous fruits that you get from the likes of an Oloroso, you get much more wonderful, kind of softer, almost like orchard and stone style fruits, with kind of beautiful, kind of fig and kind of more light raisin style flavor characteristics and styles. This one is a bit of a step up in ABV. You're going from 43% in the stout up to 46% in the Whistler PX I Love You. And it's just, wonderful, creamy, fruity, elegant whiskey that you could both sip on a summer's day and kind of get into and kind of aromatize, or it's got enough in there, it's got enough bite, it's got enough kind of fuzz going on that you could sit beside a fire on a cold winter's evening and kind of sip it and let it evolve in the glass and see what more flavors kind of come out of it.
Yes, essentially to all of that. Yes, every part of it. I want to try some PX over some ice cream, and I want
Agreed.
To be honest, I'd have this over ice cream. Oh, it's got lovely, sweeties on the nose. That is lovely. I also should one thing I should comment about for these two products that are lower down. The link is to the Summerton shop. What we will be doing, because for members we're kind of the cheapest price in the market. But we didn't have that much stock this week. We will be ordering extra. So if you put the order in, we'll be fulfilling next week. It's just so you know, it's not being sent out tomorrow. It'll be sent out next week. But let's get back to the enjoying the whiskey. I just have to do a little bit of admin. I realised I forgot to say that earlier.
Yeah, and Summerton, a big thank you to Dan at Summerton. You were the first retailer in the United Kingdom to actually list the Whistler whiskey. So that was a proud moment to see the Whistler listed in a UK retailer and available to customers in the UK. People have been banging at us for years and years and years. So I think was it last June, Dan, we got it up on the shop before it went live in the Whiskey Exchange, before it went live in Master of Malt. It was the Summerton store. So thank you, Dan, for that opportunity and for championing the Whistler brand for us.
Oh, thank you for letting me. It does. It always helps that whenever I go to an event and you're there, I spend an hour at your stand and forget that anyone else is there. It all kind of flows from there. These are the inside tricks to running a whiskey club. Enjoy chatting to someone. That's it.
Well, this evening's amazing. This feels like back to when we were in the lockdown sessions and everyone was just hopping online having whiskies. I was saying to you earlier, it's great to be back in my own sitting room doing tastings. It's much more comfortable in here than on a rickety stool in a pub, and a much shorter commute home as well, as I was saying to you in the chat beforehand.
And I'm sure that people will really enjoy not being hugged by me incessantly for the next 3 hours. Sorry, Fee. We got a quick one at the whiskey show. We saw each other as we're leaving.
Hug, I just say.
Yeah, it was.
That was great to see you.
Yeah, I saw you right at the very end. So if you haven't figured this out yet, and if you're not coming to the Whiskey Festival in May next year, I hug a lot of people. I can't help it. I just get really happy. Toby's going to get a massive hug in May.
It's the best part of seeing you in person, Dan.
The chat's not that.
Yeah.
But sorry, let's go back to the whiskey. So, Fee.
Yes.
Delight us, please.
I am getting pulled pork in barbecue sauce, duck in hoisin sauce. I'm getting really, really hungry. You've got the dark chocolate fig, which you expect from the PX. You've got the dark chocolate. You've got the coffee, which you expect from the PX, but it's wonderfully meaty. You've got a dime bar, creme brulee coffee, Dunwich. It's earthy. You've got petrichor. You've got borage and soda bread. Buttered panettone, polished brass sticks. And do you remember the school compass, that little metal thing you always accidentally stabbed yourself with? That might
Oh,
just
yeah.
be me. But I've got that. Coal tar soap and floral gums. And that's before I've added water. I can tell you what I get with water as well.
Go for it. If you've got more words, because like literally, I want to go eating with you. Whenever you go for dinner, I want in.
Come back to Brighton. You've got Death by Chocolate. You've got chocolate pop. You've got chocolate truffles. You've got cake, battens, bourbon biscuits or bourbon biscuits, raisin Danish. You've got those fig rolls, which I adore, marzipan, nougat. You've got Bakewell tart. It's just absolutely wonderful. Key lime pine. You've also got acorn, duck à l'orange with a little pinch of cinnamon, and Jamaica ginger cake. And incidentally, the book is named after the film.
I'm getting the theme for a few of them. So there's a meaty bit, but it's the sweet sauce that's really doing a lot of the work, and you've got a
That's
meaty undertone behind it, and that's the theme
that's
of what we're getting.
Yeah.
Oh,
And you've got balsamic vinegar as well, which is, again, it's coming from the PX. And PX is my favourite sherry. I've got numerous different bottles in the house, including 30-year-olds, and it's just wonderful.
And an interesting note on the Pedro Jimenez here, we actually get our Pedro Jimenez casks from Montilla Moralas, which is actually the home of the Pedro Jimenez grape. So a lot of producers will get their Pedro Jimenez casks from Jerez. So what the guys in Jerez are doing is they're actually purchasing their Pedro Jimenez grapes from Montilla Moralas, bringing it to Jerez and making their sherry there in Jerez, whereas our Pedro Jimenez casks are literally being aged in warehouses right beside the fields where the Pedro Jimenez grapes are actually growing in Montilla Moralas. It's just south of Cordoba. Wonderful place, a lot less commercialized and touristic than, say, Jerez. You will not get a tour of a bodega over anywhere in Montilla Moralas unless you have an appointment beforehand or someone who works in the industry. They're much more kind of hard-working, laborious kind of country gentlemen. But they're absolutely fantastic. And what I absolutely love is they still have the tradition of the daily grog. At 11 o'clock, they get a glass of sherry. At 2 o'clock, they get a glass of sherry. And they all get a bottle of sherry to be brought home with them in the evening, which I thought was incredibly impressive from the actual sherry producers in the region. Yeah. Now, they work bloody hard. I was trying to make casks. If anyone follows me on Instagram, I was trying to make casks in their distillery, and I failed miserably. Absolutely miserably. These guys are very talented at what they do, I have to say.
Sorry for everyone saying they're not getting school compass. Can you smell that little metal element?
So it's the
which is a really positive thing. It took me straight back to school days.
So it's a metallic note.
But a really nice metallic note.
I was really enjoying the duck à l'orange. I don't want to think of different metals.
Okay, go back to
I mean, in a horrible way.
With a pinch of cinnamon.
I definitely get a metallic note.
We're going to have to start ending, but before we do, Stephen, can you share a little bit more of your plans? You mentioned about Boann itself releasing some of your own liquid next year under the Boann label brand. But what's coming in front of us? What's happening with that brand? What exciting things have we got for the Whistler coming forward, as well as what you've already shared?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we've 4 Whistler releases coming kind of in the next 6 to 9 months, one of them hopefully sooner. And then June 2024 will be the first commercial release of Boann single pot still whiskey. We've done a number of single casks. There is, so we align with the Solstices. Our distillery is located right beside a very famous building called Newgrange. It's kind of like the Irish equivalent to Stonehenge. And on the 21st of December every year, the sun rises and shines down into a burial chamber in the middle of the building. So what we actually was, I suppose, when the sun was rising and shining into the burial chamber in Newgrange on the 21st of December in 2019, it was also rising and shining in our stills, so we turned them on for the first time. So we've aligned our distillery with the Solstices. So on the 21st of December 2022, our whiskey was officially 3 years old, and we threw a giant party in the distillery, and we gave everybody a bottle from cask number 2, which we hand-filled and hand-bottled on the day. And then on June 22nd, 2023, we released our first commercial release single cask product, which was our Boann Summer Solstice. And on the winter solstice this year, we've one more single cask being released before our commercial release is released on the summer solstice in 2024. So it's great in that people don't have to ask us when is the next Boann release coming out. They know, just wait until the winter or summer solstice and they'll be released from the distillery. So from the Whistler side of things, expect continued innovation, continued creativity, a couple of world's firsts when it comes to all things Irish whiskey. And when it comes to a Boann point of view, you can be expecting wonderful mixed mash bill, high-end single pot still Irish whiskies using an awful lot of adjunct grains, so rye, wheat, oats, unmalted barley, as well as malted barley.
Fantastic. And lost feet. Toby, any last questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, with Boann, obviously your focus is single pot still whiskey. I know you've been working on a lot of heritage recipes with the single pot still. Is it going to be a single recipe across everything, or are there going to be different recipes for different releases?
Absolutely not going to be a single recipe. So we've done over 55 different recipes in varying degrees of malted barley, unmalted barley, rye, wheat, and oats. We also have on our stills reflux coils, so we can run heavy, light, and medium reflux to create heavy, light, and medium distillates. So all of those 55 recipes we've distilled in heavy, medium, and light. So if you look at it, we already have 165 different distillates going into over 60 different cask types already. Now, by creating this much variability, you're kind of able to achieve, I suppose, consistency in relation to whatever our core commercial release is going to be. We still have no idea what our core commercial release is going to be. We have 3 releases being launched on June 21st, 2024, the summer solstice. That will be limited edition first releases, and after that, we're going to have to follow it up with a core Boann whiskey. What that's actually going to be, we've absolutely no idea. We need to go trawling through the warehouses and figure out how we're going to amalgamate all of these different whiskey styles and characters together, utilizing whiskies that are both high in these adjunct grains and low in these adjunct grains in the actual vatting. Now, that's all dependent on the current legislation states that you can only use up to 5% adjunct grains in your single pot still recipe. It's with the European Union at the moment. It's made it through the Irish Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine, that they're looking at changing this legislation to allow up to 30% adjunct grains in the actual recipe. So we're banking on that legislation change going through, because I suppose we've been distilling an awful lot of non-GI compliant single pot still whiskey currently, but hopefully will be GI compliant when that legislation changes. So expect an awful lot of variability in the releases from Boann.
Well, fingers crossed it goes your way and you can release whatever you want.
Fingers crossed. The whole whiskey industry in Ireland, I think, is banking on it at the moment and hoping for it. So hopefully it will.
I've got a feeling we might be chatting more about this in a little while.
There you go.
Any other questions?
Just want to say they were absolutely fabulous, and I love the penguin bars on the palate.
Penguin bars.
I haven't had those for years, and it just brought back so many memories.
Do you know what penguin bars are, Stephen?
Of course, yeah. They were a
I
large
don't
part
know
of my
what goes
childhood.
which way anymore. But thank you so much. Thank you once again, sharing your knowledge, your whiskey, just everything really. This is fantastic. It's delicious stuff. Thank you for working with us all at once. It's been great to share the different things that you're doing over the course of the last few months.
Thanks very much, guys. Looking forward to chatting more later on at the end of the session.
So anyone who enjoyed those whiskies, if you'd like to pick one up, link below the screen on the Summerton page. That'll take you to our club shop. These will be delivered out next week. And yes, we need to figure out a way to have a club bottle. Just it's something I was meant to say at the beginning, completely forgot. Irish whiskey is something we haven't had in the club as a club bottle. So this event, when we had James was coming later on at one of our virtual whiskey festivals, it's our chance to have some experience with Irish whiskey and get in there now as Irish whiskey is coming forward, is coming of age, because we need to do some Irish whiskey in the club too. So thank you so much, everyone. We've got a 3-minute break. Go and have a pee. Go and recharge your water. I'll see you in a minute. Oh, there should be one more video coming, Matt. Just checking. There should be an intro.
Yeah, it might help if I press the start cam button. Sorry.
Oh no, there should be Matt in the background. There should be an intro video still to go. And just to set it up, everyone, this is it wasn't made specifically for us. It was actually an investment video, but it was a really interesting insight into what's going on at a distillery, and it's nice to get the different views. And so that's why we picked this intro video to share. I'm just checking if Matt has got that intro video.
Welcome to the beautiful new home of the Sliabh Distillers, the Ardra Distillery. After the successful 2020 crowdfunding, we took this site from greenfield to whiskey distilling in just 52 weeks and have managed to do everything we said we would back then. We've drawn from some of the world's great drinks companies a senior team that share our ambition, hold firm on governance, and when the pandemic threw up challenges, worked quickly with us to work out how to thrive in this environment. We decided that the vision was strong and we needed a rigorous commitment to cost, to phase the capex, to really support the community, and above all, not to sit back, but to double down on selling. And it's a good job, because the categories have remained remarkably resilient. Irish whiskey and super premium gin still show decade-long growth in excess of 9% per year, and that puts into sharp relief our performance. Bart and Dave, our commercial leads, have now sold 250,000 bottles across 40 countries, with clear focus on the USA, Canada, UK, Ireland, and now Australia. And through them, our savoury and Doulaman Irish Maritime gin is growing 3 times faster than the category. And the silky Irish whiskies have shown, well, explosive growth. Volumes tripled last year, and for the first half of this year, they've tripled again. That's 20 times category growth. Dark Silky even won the Best Blended Irish Whiskey at the prestigious San Francisco Spirits Competition in 2021. Given its distinctive smoky style, that's surprising and pretty special. Graham, our head distiller, fresh from Ontario, Kentucky and Speyside, and his team are making some incredible peated single malt and peated pot still Irish whiskies. And straight off the still, they are rich and soft and sweet and have that distinctive dry smoky character we set out to deliver from our grains in process. For now though, we must leave it to age and rest and let the barrels and the angels do their thing. So we think the opportunity is clear, and we need your help to extend the capacity of the Ardra Distillery to 6,000 barrels a year, to build the visitor and gin hall that will allow us to maximise visitor revenues, to build a new bottling hall on the Bullfield, which will allow us to support our international growth, and finally, working capital. Come on board and help us reclaim the distilling heritage of Donegal. We have 1,200 private investors in the Liag, alongside some government bodies and Asahi of Japan, so you'll be in good company. Join us, or as we say in Irish, Big Elin.
It's my pleasure. Those people who were at our last virtual whiskey festival will remember a certain gentleman that knew a hell of a lot about whiskey and kept the chat going when the first attempt at doing an event fell apart. And his whiskies were probably my favourite, not probably, those who chatted to me for a few hours after, because we went to about 4 a.m. No, they were my favourite whiskies of the event. So putting together an Irish whiskey tasting, I knew there was one brand we had to have with us. And I'd like to say welcome to James from Sliabh Distillers. Thank you for your time. I know you're incredibly busy running a distillery team, brands, and everything that's going on at once. And thank you for spending some time and sharing, once again, your delicious whiskey and allowing us to know how things have evolved, to learn how things have evolved in the last 2 years.
Brilliant, Dan. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, mate. And yeah, what can I say? It's distilleries are a lot colder when they're not running than you might think.
Especially at the moment, yeah. I'm in my house or my dad's house, and it's cold in here, and I'm just like, why? I swear there's a fire going next door.
No, well, even the orange lights are not warming us up, but things are good. Business is good. It's a tougher world out there at the moment, but yeah, I remember that last conversation very well. It was actually kind of it was broad, it was wide ranging, and actually we ended up with some rather deeper questions than I thought we'd get into. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is actually the influence as to why we're having the chat at the very end. That I told you before, that's probably the best whiskey event I've been to, and it wasn't meant to be. It didn't have any whiskey at it. It was just so informative and amazing.
A bit like talking to Stephen and Ryan earlier. We're all enthusiasts at heart, and I mean, the one thing that's quite noticeable about this Irish whiskey conversation is you've only got one Irish accent on it, which is pretty telling. But I grew up in Woking. Parents are Irish. Came back with this view of and Woking is the centre of the universe, home of the jam. Do not argue with me on that. My parents left in the 60s from Donegal to come over to England to find work, and really that's yes. I was nowhere near Pizza Express on that day, so I can't comment. But we felt like we could come back and create opportunity for the whole area, not just in the sort of jobs within the distillery and that kind of stuff, but the sort of spin-off benefits of distilleries are quite incredible, really, in terms of tourism, hospitality, and you can kind of drive some interesting things. And interestingly, I actually call out Stephen Randall's as one of the kind of key success moments for us. So that video he shot there was done for our Crowdcube raise, the second Crowdcube raise we did, and the first one was when we launched Dark Silky, and Dark Silky was ready to launch on Paddy's Day 2020, and of course the world locked down. So you're sitting here on the 14th of March with a brand and a launch strategy, and it all just goes straight out the window. And we managed to get a website up. We weren't sure whether it was legal to sell or not on it, but we thought it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission, so we just did it. And then there was all these kind of impromptu whiskey tastings going on, and people got onto them. And the one night there was one, and someone put up, "I'm drinking a Pierce Lyons 7-year-old or something. What are you drinking?" And Stephen Randall's had, "I'm drinking the new Dark Silky from Sliabh Liag. I have to say it's wonderful." And suddenly it was like, I haven't heard of this. What's going on? And the whole of Twitter lit up, and our shop just was like bing, bing, bing. And no one launched anything for 3 months. Everyone was sitting waiting for new normal. And so we had 3 months of a clear run at telling a smoky whiskey story, which, if I'm honest, was a really hard sell for the last sort of the 2 years before that, 3 years before that. And suddenly it just came alive. So we've been extraordinarily lucky in that sense.
And how I mean, we were a year after. We were still in lockdown when we in and out of lockdowns when we last spoke. How have things evolved? How things have changed in the last 2 years? Because I think you're about 1.5 years into distilling your own liquid at that point in time.
Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
Hello, where have things got on to now?
Yeah, so the distillery's up and running, two shifts a day, 5 days a week at the moment. Just about to go to 6 days a week. And so it's doing very well. We haven't tried to do sort of lots of different things. I don't think the distillery size actually lends you to that. So we're at 500,000 litres, 3,600 barrels. So what we've done is said, look, we're going to lean into smoky heavily. That's all we make for ourselves is smoky. I've made unpeated whiskies here for other people, but I haven't made any for us. And so it's dedicated to peated whiskies. And because of actually there were some problems with the malting, the maltsters, we've actually had to make our predominant style is heavily peated, so 55 ppm, grains in, triple distilled single malt mainly, but we also make sort of 25% pot stills, but the opposite way around to Boann there. And we've had to make some medium peated, and we did some lightly peated, so 15 ppm, just to see what it would be like. But in general, it's all peated. It's just various degrees of peating. So that's going very well. We got yields for the real anoraks out there. We get yields of about 430 litres of alcohol per tonne, which is actually pretty good for a craft operation. And I think that might be well down to the fact it's grains in, so there's that extra carbohydrate in the fermenters and what have you. So that's going really well. And the whiskey turns out to be rather better even than I kind of could have hoped for, really. I was with Dave Broom in South Africa recently, and he tried the 2-year-old heavily peated in sherry, and he kind of commented specifically on the fact that we've got this kind of fruity, sweet, nutty flavour with a overlay of pipe smoke, but the finish on most peated whiskies tend to be very dry, and ours not. Ours is actually noticeably sweet, which makes it moreish, which is kind of good. And I'd love to say that was by design, but it may well just be a bit of luck.
Yeah, no, and so should we start with the red or the dark?
I think we should start with red, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask one quick question before we go on to the red. And
yeah,
so Silky, I remember you saying you had from the very beginning you had a vision of what you wanted it to taste like. You knew what you were aiming for, and you went out and you sourced liquid for Silky to get you to that point. Now you're making your own. How close to where you have Silky do you see your own spirit being, or how far away do you see it being?
So massively far away is the answer. So the Silkies are blends that take you on a journey in smoke, and we'll talk about that now in terms of the red Silky is the least peated. So 4% of the blend is peated, heavily peated, triple distilled single malt. But what we're making is profoundly smoky, and it's cut very differently. So we use Great Northern liquids. So the whiskies we have in here are Great Northern. Great Northern's peated is made, with clear wort. It's not grains in, and they cut more conventionally than we do. So we take a cut that's quite different. So we cut 82 to 67. So as soon as it gets any iodine, seaweedy, TCP kind of Isla style taste, we cut straight away. So we end up with this much higher notes, much sweeter, and the smoke tends to be much more ashy, campfirey, and it reminds me of my grandfather's pipe, which was the kind of thing we set out to do. But I think it is a little bit of luck that we've actually landed quite there. So.
And did you know that you wanted those two styles from the very beginning, or has the second one evolved after you attained the first?
No, so I think the Silky, and I've already poured mine. So if anyone wants to pour their red Silky, they can. So we set out with Silky to make sure that they were kind of necessarily more commercial, because if you think about when we started 5 years ago, smoky Irish whiskey wasn't a thing, and we had to try and, Connemara existed, but not, there was nothing else really kind of leaning into that space very heavily. And when we did, we felt that we needed to take you on a journey with us. So the legendary Silky has this 4% blend. The dark Silky we come on to is 15%. And then the Midnight is 35% of the blend is peated. So you take people on degrees of smokiness, and none of them are as challenging as an Isla. But by Irish standards, all of them are sort of smoky and therefore challenging to some degree.
And now let's get on to this bottle. Ali, you are right. This is the Free Drinkers Red. How did this come about, and how is it progressed from the original red?
So I suppose we've got two sort of, the Silky range is the three, legendary, dark, and midnight, and then what we've done with. Generally, we celebrate Donegal. So everything we do celebrates Donegal, and the first red celebrated or commemorated Red Hugh O'Donnell, the last chieftain. So he was defeated by the English, Yabu sucks, and went off to Spain to raise an army and met King Philip of Spain in Rioja. So we use Rioja casks, and then he went to Simancas and stayed with the monks there, which was Ribera del Duero country. So we use Ribera casks, except the myth here is he was poisoned and died there, and the English did it. I think he wasn't that important, so he probably just got sick and died. But it's nice to blame somebody else. So we celebrate that. This one is different. So when the three drinkers were coming, we just wanted to look at taste and see, like, if we could take the great kind of wine regions or great sort of fortified wines of other areas and just take us on a flavor journey. How would we do that? And Pomerol kind of came out of that. So what you've got is this wonderful, you've got the core of silky kind of buttered popcorn, fresh green apples, has this kind of, that fresh green apple bit kind of gives way to a little bit of orange ginger, and then sort of the smoke when it warms up on your tongue. You don't get any smoke on the nose, although Fee will no doubt tell me she does. And then the sort of Pomerol cask, and it's a 6-month finish. It kind of picks up that floral note. You get a kind of almost a lavender note off those Pomerol casks, but you also get this kind of intense sweetness, and it gets a bit oily somehow, and definitely get the licorice feel that Abby's just put in there. And it just sweetens it up, and it takes the silky off in a slightly different direction, which we really enjoyed.
Yeah, I really like that. I haven't tasted this beforehand. I don't know.
So you get that, and I think the sweetness kind of makes the smoke come forward a bit somehow, and it plays quite nicely. So, and for me, it's kind of, you get that, like those strawberry Haribo kind of thing. There's that kind of intense, almost sickly sweetness of it somehow.
That's interesting, because every I remember before, the reason I fell in love with your flavor was the salted caramel, the crunchy. That still I have never ever experienced anywhere else. I tell you this every time I meet you. I may have had a couple every time, but this is just lovely in a different way.
And it starts off, I think the legendary silky has a taste. It's meant to. The memory I had when I was blending it was my grand's kitchen here in Ireland, where we kind of lived like feral kids for 10 weeks of a summer every year. And it was Grand's kitchen, and she's making apple pie. So if you can imagine that, that's how it kind of starts out. And then the Pomerol kind of brings all these other kind of textures. And I didn't expect texture to come with it, but it does. And the Pomerol's got this kind of intensity about it, which is kind of, for me, is quite hard to put your finger on. But there is this kind of herbal note as well, which I think you get off youngish, Irish single malt. You get that quite often. You get a herbally note, sometimes a bit of like baked celery kind of aroma. So and I think the core spirit kind of has the core whiskey has a sort of baked, it's sort of not baked apple, but a sort of fresh apple pie, and it becomes that sort of salted caramel. It's more like buttered popcorn for me, but that's coming from virgin oak, grain whiskey and virgin oak. So you've got the grain in this. It's a 70-30 blend. 30%. The single malt is double distilled. There's 13% of it is double distilled in Oloroso sherry. 4% is triple distilled peated. Love that. Great shout, Blackjacks. Gosh, you must be quite old.
No, don't say that. That's my favourite sweet as a kid.
that and fruit salads.
Dan.
And then you have 13% of it is triple distilled in bourbon, and then the grain whiskey, half of it is in rechar casks and half of it's in virgin oak. So and then the finish just kind of adds this red berry coulis kind of stuff to it, and there's this kind of floral note which I kind of love. It's sort of lavendery for me, but I don't know what everyone else is getting off it.
We'll start with Toby. How are you finding it at the moment, mate?
This is my first time trying the red, and it's got a hint of smoke on the nose for me, and lots of sort of caramel sweetness.
Yeah,
but it doesn't really open up on the nose. It really opens up on the palate for me, and I get like salted caramel. I get like toffee apples. I get that almost sickly sweetness, and I love a sweet whiskey, so this is right up my street. And then you get that sort of licorice on the finish, and there's also that sort of slightly sort of the smoke is, I suppose it's so slight that I think this would be the perfect introduction for somebody that, you know, would say, well, I don't like smoky whiskey, or, you know, I think this would be that first step to persuading them that smoke is a great flavour to add to whiskey.
I think that's right. We kind of talk about smoke rather than peating, because I think, well, one, I think Scotland kind of owns peat, and we do call it turf rather than peat. But it's just, if you say peat, everyone goes to Isla. So we use smoke deliberately as a flavour rather than a kind of an input to try and talk about it, which kind of works, I think. But yeah, I think the Pomerol is probably the better of the reds we've done, and
What other bits do you say the best of the reds you've done? What other casts do you have for future reds?
Well, so the Rioja on its own gives you an incredible like a strawberry sweetness rather than a raspberry sweetness. It lacks the sort of balance of the tartness, which I think is important. I should say, and please, I apologize to Mel for being rude earlier about age, but I won't apologize for the fact that I blend for me, and that means I love cold drinks. So I love ice. I love ice, not to dilute, but just to cool it down. And so everything is blended and is slightly sweeter, because once you stick the ice in, it just knocks that down a little bit, and it takes the smoke into an earthy place, which I think is quite good fun, and I like playing with that. So, but Fee looks like she's just gonna say something.
Let it out, Fee.
I was just actually reading another chat. It's just wonderful, isn't it? I just thought it is an absolute comfort dram. You have got a warm, comfortable bed with cotton sheets and a bedspread. There's so much going on. You've got sesame snaps. You've got a smoky chimney, but in the next street. So it's there, but it's not that close. But if any of you had croup when you were young, I don't know if any of you went through this, but I always had the coal tar lamp in the room so that I could breathe. That's what it's like. There's a little hint of sulphur. You've got fireworks, slight iodine, and it needs a good wash, but in a really good way. And then when you add water, you've got coal smoke, you've got Edinburgh Rock, there's Dosa, the Indian pancakes, Germline, a little bit of iodine on bandages, Dunlop Green Flash Plimsolls, because I am old. You've got telescopes, there's a little bit of funky pond water, they're rubber ducks, brick. It just reminds me of Borough Market. Potato pancake, coconut cream, floral gums, paperbacks, and old banknotes. It is fabulous. And that's before we've even drunk it.
Gosh. The coconut note's quite nice. I think that's it's almost like a toasted coconut. You get that kind of when you've roasted it in the oven.
Yeah.
I get that.
Like a caramelized coconut.
But then when you drink it, you have a big woof of smoke. It's really smoky. You're blowing smoke rings.
Gosh.
I'm loving it.
Fantastic.
I'm worried about getting onto the dark now if you're blowing smoke rings on the red.
I'm a lady, what can I say? And I love the Pontefract cakes. You've also got Kendal mint cakes. It's just beautiful. Your Germline Swarfega, dirty coal smoke. And again, you've got more of that Swarfega coming through, which, yes, it ages me. Wait till I get to Fairy production.
All these conversations reminded me of school.
Yes,
but interestingly, I put a note in there earlier. I think for me, the way you use language, and Fee's particularly good at kind of just being prepared to say what the connection is. You know, I did some tasting notes years ago, and I wrote down that something tasted like a Sam Brown belt, and I wasn't around in the First World War to know what a Sam Brown belt, but it had this leathery thing, and it just reminded me of this picture of a First World War soldier standing in a trench. Yes. And so I wrote it down, and I got rightly parody for it, but David Stewart did sign it in the end, so he was happy enough with it. But it kind of, if you're willing to say those connections, it takes people to a very interesting place. And so I often talk, when you were talking about the dunnage, that sort of damp, fusty, musty smell, and I quite often describe that wet corner of the school library where the roof leaked a little bit and the books get damp and dusty and no one goes there apart from to sort of hide from the teacher. And there's a particular smell. And as soon as you describe that picture, everybody smiles, because everyone knew the corner of the school library where they hid, and where the books were dusty because no one ever took them off the shelf, but it was slightly damp and it had that kind of aroma. So if you can kind of construct a picture that takes people to a happy place, then
It is
the
very
tasting, it
visual.
makes notes. Yeah, it suddenly makes sense.
When you're drinking, you just get these images like the compass from the school.
Yeah, and
And
licking
you
batteries.
just link it, and it's just wonderful. I mean, it's such a wonderful comfort dram. This is the sort of thing, I've had an absolutely hellish day. I just want to sit down and have a couple of drams of that.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. So kind.
And I cannot wait for the next one. And I do have a bottle. I just can't remember where it is in the house. So if anyone could tell me which of the 6 rooms which have got whiskey in it is, that would be really helpful.
The first 3.
I've looked in those ones.
I'd be careful. Dan might be living in there looking for them over the next
I
few
think
weeks.
it's behind me.
You're only 20 minutes down the road. I'm going to pop out and
Could
just.
you please come over? Because it's been driving me nuts. I searched the upstairs hall. It's not there. That was my first guess, but I do think it's in one of the boxes behind me.
I'll save you the bottom half of one of these.
Thank you.
But I'm going to take this slightly further away from the whiskey. Or it's still the whiskey, but not the individuals. Yeah. One of the things you mentioned it comes across in the video is you said the distillers come from, was it Montana or America and Speyside?
Yeah.
Do you find that but you had quite a big idea as to what you were trying to create in the flavour. How do you find their influences from the different backgrounds, being that one of them is shared with you? Have any of that changed what you're trying to do? Have they been able to allow you to attain those, what you're aiming for? How has those different influences come in to the distillery?
It's a brilliant question, because what we've I suppose there are a few things that kind of are at play. Who wants to live in on the west coast of Ireland the way where we do? It's beautiful and it's wild and it's raw and it's inspiring, but it is also quite isolated. The road does literally stop. There's the village behind me and then the sea, and you're sort of living in a community of sort of 300-400 people, so everybody knows everybody, and suddenly you go from being anonymous to being sort of one of the town celebrities. So it's not for everyone. I suppose we started with such a clear picture of the distillery, and actually more because we didn't have enough money, didn't bring the head distiller on when we were designing the distillery. So I designed it with Forsyths myself, and then I had some input from guys at Grants that I know and were willing to help me. So we started off with a very clear vision around what that whiskey was, and the bargain I made with Graham was, I need you to give me 3 years of this. So we've got to lay down enough whiskey to make an ongoing, consistent business. So let's just go with this, and then we'll put a break in, which will be next October, and we can start to experiment. I mean, he was originally, he's a Geordie, so he worked at Mortlock, I think, with Diageo. He was on the startup team at Bullet, and then he went up to Canada and worked at a distillery up in Hamilton. So he's got some really good experience. We've got some great brewer distillers, young guys who've got some good ideas. Some of the guys come out of Brewdog. We've got some guys that have come out of a bakery who have got the most amazing ideas. But what we've done is said, look, this is what I want to make, and that's what we're going to make. Make it as well as we can, and what they've made is better than I could have imagined. And then we'll put a break into it to sort of play with different yeast, different grains. I don't have a passion for rye at all, but I know Graham does, so we'll probably revisit that with a pot still or something. But I think you still have to, we started with such a clear idea that we're going to stay with, we're still going to push that journey, and we're not going to make anything unpeated. So the distillery is the only kind of dedicated to peat journey, and it will stay that way.
So they help you realize that actually we'll pour the dark silver peat now whilst we're in the conversation. You pour, sniff whilst we're chatting. So they're enabling you to reach the aim of what you've been trying to achieve. Do their thoughts and input ever change where your goal is?
No, I don't think they've changed the goal, but they've certainly changed. There are aspects of the way we run the place that are completely different to how I envisaged them. they're better, and they're more efficient, and they're more effective. And so there's those kind of aspects to it. There are some things that are kind of important to me, like soft mouthfeel. So we distill really slowly in the intermediate and spirit stills. We've got and the cuts are kind of very specific, but they helped me get to those cuts. You know, I knew what I wanted taste wise. I didn't know how to deliver it. They did, and so it is a proper kind of coming together of ideas. But I do think it helps to have a very singular view, or it helps me to have a singular view of what it should taste like, because I wonder where Irish whiskey goes, and maybe this is for later in terms of distilleries. A lot of distilleries want to be seen as innovative, and if you want to be innovative, that's great. But innovation doesn't have to mean lots and lots of different things as per the craft beer world. It can be kind of expressions of a singular idea in a different way. So that's the kind of route we've gone down, because it kind of suits our bandwidth. It suits our lack of capital, because we you know, most distilleries don't have enough money, and we're no different. And so you kind of have to cut your cloth according to what you can deliver, really. So so I think that's important.
And
so
now you've gone, what were we? Is it 5 years, 6 years into it?
We're 6 years into 2017. We built the gin distillery and did that, and then in 2020 we laid down whiskey during lockdown in the gin still, which we released in July this year, and that was, I mean, off the scale smoky. So it was probably over 100 ppm, and we double distilled it. So and those bottles are out there. Quite a few of them are drunken, which is brilliant. So, you know, there was only 139 bottles. They all went. The first one turned up at auction last month and went for €1,600 versus the €300 price point that we sold it at. So it's, you know, it's cracking.
A case for yourself for let down the line, just to fund
I kept one.
Cask or something.
We kept one for ourselves for the archive, and we've kept one. I did the Dublin Marathon very slowly, I have to say, the other day for the motor neurone disease, because it took my mum earlier in the year. But we've kept one bottle that we're going to raffle for her, to raise money for motor neurone. So it's but other than that, yeah, they're all gone. So,
and going back 6 years, probably 7 or 8 when you were first doing it, if there was one thing you could tell your original self to do slightly differently, or aim for a different point, what would be one? Because obviously there's loads, but as we know.
Well, it will take you twice as long and cost you twice as much as you think. So by all means, be as deluded as me that you can do it faster and cheaper than anyone else, because otherwise you probably don't start. But you need to understand that it is going to take you twice as long as you think. Learn to love and learn to love your revenue officer, not physically, obviously that would end up in the tribunal, but your revenue officer is a very important person, your tax officer locally.
Did you find out the hard way?
No, to be fair, we were very lucky, but only because Peter Mulryan from Blackwater, I was kind of ploughing ahead, and I rang him up and I said, I've got this far, I've done this, and he was like, and I'm just trying to work out how to get the licenses. And he says, you've got this far without talking to your tax officer? He says, you want to stop now, and then go get them in and bring them inside the tent and get everything moving. So so we did that, and that was really good advice. And you know, you're lucky because the industry's kind of got that collegiate feel about it. People do help each other. Probably less helpful to each other in market where the rubber really hits the road. But I think from a technical kind of engineering the business, financing your business, you know, no one should have to wear some of the scars that, you know, we wear. And so, you know, and equally there are other guys who've got different scars. So we all help each other.
That's fair. We should probably get back onto the whiskey.
Yeah. So the next whiskey is Dark Silky, and this is certainly where my heart is. So the inspiration for this fella is a 10-year-old me, and I'm 6'3" now, but I was a lot smaller than that at one point. And at 10 years old, I used to get up before my granddad in the morning, and I used to get his pipe from beside the fireplace, and I'd run around the house at breakfast like I was Popeye, you know, the big man of the house. And for me, there's a visceral memory of sweet appley tobacco, and then this kind of ashy, campfirey pipe tobacco smoke aroma, which is visceral and kind of it's comforting and safe. It feels very, very safe, and I wanted to capture that. So this is again a 70-30 blend. 15% of it is double distilled single malt in Oloroso sherry. I'm not a big fan of PX, sorry Fee. So I like Oloroso, but I don't mind PX as a finish. I just don't like fully matured PXs. And then the triple distilled is in bourbon, so 15% of that. And then the 70% grain whiskey, and this is all virgin oak. And so now you get that almost salted caramel sweetness. Now I get that intensely off this fella. And then it's like baked apples. You still got that kind of theme of orange and ginger. And it's like Ronseal. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's kind of smoky. It's got this big pipe smoke blanket laid over the top of it. That's my rather primitive set of tasting notes. But
now we move up to Toby. I haven't spoken to him for a while. How are you finding it? Actually, can you just share? There's two of you that have the same glass on screen, and I feel that it's James and Toby. I feel that whilst I talked about a number of different glasses, tasting why that you can have your whiskey in, there's a certain glass that's synonymous with Irish whiskey.
Yeah, the tour glass.
Yeah, please share if you have a little bit of information to share on it. All I know is the look and where it comes from.
Do you know, Toby? Or
well, I know the base is isn't the base designed around the island of Skellig?
That's right.
Yeah, so that's the design, because it's not
the profile
round.
of it is
so like the island.
It's like the island.
Where they shot one of the new Star Wars films, funnily enough.
And it does look like the Millennium Falcon with
a
little bit filled in, or it does look like Darth Vader. So so it's the tour glass. It's an Irish lady, Rosie Goswell, owns a company, and she kind of wanted a glass that fitted for the Irish. If the Glencairn was synonymous with Scotland, I think the tour was synonymous with Ireland. And I know this because I know Rosie very well, but the story is that it's designed to be big enough that you can maintain eye contact when you're drinking out of it, which in a Glencairn you can't.
So you don't tilt your head back too far.
Too far. That's it. So the flare kind of is meant to take the alcohol fumes away. It allows you to get better at the flavour. It can take ice, which is good for me. You can actually make an Irish coffee in it. It's big enough to make an Irish coffee. So it's a kind of altogether more generous, more flexible kind of whiskey tasting glass. So
next time you do Irish whiskey, you know that there is a glass that you should be considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bacon flavour that people are getting is absolutely bang on. So
the frazzles.
But it's and this was, this for us, I suppose, kind of really cemented the Silky Journey, as was the one that I think most people sat up and said, okay, this is kind of interesting. It won Best Blended Irish in San Francisco in 21. And for it to win a competition like that, for me, is kind of interesting because it's an outlier flavor-wise. It's not the typical Irish whiskey taste. So you were asking about flavors and what you can do with this. So I use this with piri piri. If you take this and you put piri piri and olive oil together and then marinate prawns in it before you put it on the barbecue, it's unbelievably good.
I got there was one of the smokehead ones I had, and I got the extra smoky, and it kind of ruined putting peated whiskey into anything, because everything I put a drop of it into, it was just an entire plate of that, and it's not what I wanted. Whereas this, I can see much more. It's a proper ingredient as opposed to a putting absinthe in a glass of anything kind of thing.
It actually makes a really good Sazerac or Boulevardier. So a little bit of absinthe always goes well.
Oh, I'm in on that. But so Toby, what did you get on this one? And do you remember it from how has it changed from when we had it a couple of years ago?
It's funny because obviously I tried it at the Summerton Whiskey Festival, and it was probably the best dram of the festival for me. Having bought a bottle of this since, it was slightly different and not as good. But this is exactly as I remember. So there must be batch variation. And this is memories in a glass.
So there is. So interestingly, when we were sort of first launched it, we were doing sort of 3,000 bottle batches, and effectively you end up with one peated cask in that. And so the strength of that makes a big difference. Whereas now we sort of when we're vatting it, vatting is maybe 6,000, even 9,000 bottles at a time. So you've kind of iron out that variability between casks a bit better. So we had a batch. I want to say about 9-10 months ago, and it was much drier and much less subtlety to it. And I didn't get to it in time before it went out. Otherwise, I'd have probably pulled it or tried to finish it or do something else with it. But now that we're doing the bigger batches, we've got much more consistency going on to it. And the other thing I think we've some of the whiskies that we got from Great Northern, there were some really, really big sherry bombs for a while, and I suspect they've worked through all those casks, and so you just don't get that massive sherry kick on it now, which you probably did 2 years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't that it was unpleasant; it was just different to what I remembered, and I think it was a little bit more herbal and a little bit less sweet. Whereas this that I'm drinking today is exactly as I remember it. It's got the right combination of sweet and smoke, and it's lovely.
I've had chewiness into that as well.
Oh yeah, very oily. Yeah, very thick on the palate.
And also, there's a comment from earlier from Eric. He started off as a negative, but to be honest, it ended up in a positive, which was my only complaint about Silky. Was the bottle was too tall for my whiskey shelf. You're like, okay, this is a negative. And then I kept it by the telly, which is closer to the couch, so I drank it quicker. Like, actually,
maybe that's all in the marketing.
Yeah.
So I can tell you that. So we're trying to work on that at the moment. So I'm trying to take 15 millimeters out of the bottle. So and the reason is that the bottle historically was a wine bottle, and so it was meant to have a driven cork. And of course, if we put a cork in it with a tea cork, you end up with the 12.5 millimeters of the wooden bit at the top, which is now it doesn't fit on a standard shelf. So it's there are plenty of people that kind of give me that bit of feedback, and all I can say is you need to put it on the top shelf, and then you'll know where it is.
Yeah, you're not the only brand, so it's good that you stand out.
The feedback was it's closer to hand. I think it's swinging. That's all it.
Yeah, we'll take that. Yeah, definitely. So
now, Fee, what are you getting on this one? Please share your.
I am rolling around,
and we want brand names as well.
Sorry,
not just generic fig rolls. We want to know the brand names.
No, I apologise. It's the red ones which are in the kitchen, but you need to roll around in the mud in front of a tannery. It is absolutely filthy. I'm loving it. You've got polished chrome door handles, Korean seaweed rolls, sesame snaps, apple donuts. You've got golf clubs in a golf bag, printed magazines, and those metal shards which catch fire. It's those.
Oh, yeah.
And a meat fondue with extra kirsch and strawberry pencils. I'm loving it. But you do add water. Sinclair, you need to add water. It changes it. You've got really dirty smoke. You've got leather, warm horse, hay, coal dust, trainers, blackcurrant chewits. There's duck in plum sauce. You've got a cheese fondue this time in kirsch. Custard donuts, pear drops, apple snow. And then on the palate, it is filthy. You've got mud, iodine, coal smoke, brambles, blackcurrant, iodine bandages, an operating theatre. I'm slightly worried that I know this, including propofol, which if you've had as many operations as I've had, it's what they give you just before you go under, between a local and a general anaesthetic. It's awful. It's what Michael Jackson called Jesus juice. It is that. I'm not saying it's awful. It is great in whiskey. It's not great in real life because you start thinking, oh, I feel all funny. But add water and you've got engine oils, you've got dirty smoke, warm tractor in a hayfield, sunglasses, ashy burnt lettuce, and it is just utterly wonderful and filthy. Totally filthy. So we're finishing on a filthy note.
It's a
I don't.
tribunal.
I don't remember it being this filthy last time. I just remember loving
It's
it.
really
And I'm
dirty.
like, yeah, but I don't know what. Like last time, I didn't notice it at all. I was like, this is just delicious. And now I'm like, this is filthy delicious. Lovely.
This has got really dirty.
Yeah. Oh dear.
And I'm actually trying
Good
to.
way.
You got
and
more?
a Bunsen burner with potassium, which
wow,
takes
that-
me
that's
right
a lot
back
to
to
know.
the school teacher who did not quite know how to use a Bunsen burner safely.
Ah.
I can remember my school teacher, Danny Hawkan, who used to come around with a rubber slipper when the Bunsen burner was on, trying to make sure that none of us started messing around or it came down on your backside very quickly. So
That's kinky. And so that I think now he'd be arrested.
Oh,
Apologies for
there's a
taking
lot
it
of-
down to the gutter.
No, there's a
This
lot of
is-
that in childhood. Yeah.
I'm sorry, someone has just added Coke. Drink whiskey
Yes.
the way that you want to. But again, I would say try this in a dog nose. If you have Guinness, if you've got any sort of stout, add this and it's going to just light up your life. It's wonderful.
I've got to say, I'm a fan of a smoky cokey. Just going to put it out there. I can't help it. I just like that sweet with peaty.
I'm allergic to Coke. I did put some of my dark silky in Coke just to try it, and it works really well. Not this time, but I had a bottle of it.
So it's also we have a version of Coke here in Donegal called Football Special, and it's a bit more like a sort of cherry Coke, if you like, but it foams like a beer, and it's like a local bottler that's still here since the 1940s, and the guys over here have a drink on Twitter. They call it the Silky Special, which is dark silky and football special, which I've been sort of working with Seamus McDade, who owns the company, to see whether we should stick it in a can. I think it'd be quite cool, but it works really well with bitter lemon as well if you're into that. And they have a thing here called Club Lemonade, which is it's like a dirty, cloudy lemonade type thing. Superb in that as well. So I don't mind if you come back and buy, but as long as you buy a second one, you can do whatever the hell you please to it.
I'll review on that. And on this, we're going to round off because I've extended this a little bit. Sorry, we were chatting about other things, which we're going to come on to. I'm going to round off this section and invite the other two on. But I just remind everyone, if you like to those two bottles and you want to pick one up, the links are below. For the red, which Silky, which is the free drinkers special, almost all out everywhere, including at the distillery. We put the link to Amazon because it's the only place that we could find that we know that is. So it's the last few bottles. And obviously the dark silky link is on there as well.
I think also the Three Drinkers one, there's a contribution to My Black Dog as well, the Depression Support Network.
Then I'd recommend that way. I mean, I don't like promoting Amazon things. People may have noticed in the club that I don't really share that stuff, but it's for a good cause. So definitely worth looking that way too. But what we're going to do now is welcome back Stephen and Ryan, just so we can have a little bit more of a conversation. We've touched on different points of just general Irish whiskey, different influences that come in, different reasons you've come over for particularly in one direction for one person to have an impact on Irish whiskey. And the idea is that we just talk a little bit more about Irish. There are a couple of questions, but what I encourage you to do in the audience is if you've got any questions about Irish whiskey, without being too weird, please put them in and we will try and drag them on. Ian, if you're on the YouTube, on our YouTube channel, if you go to your email, there's a link to where this video is embedded in our website, and below that there are links to every single bottle. If anyone else is wondering where the links are, it's on the Summerton page where this is. If you're not sure where that is, just check your email from yesterday that gave you a link to where we are, and if it still isn't, just drop me a note later and I'll drop you a link in. It's also in our Facebook and our Discord groups as well. I dropped them in before coming in here. But back to Irish whiskey. Thank you very much for staying on in the background, guys. Who've been here, particularly Ryan, who's been here from the very beginning. And there's one question I would like to start with. The legislation historically on Irish whiskey was based in a time when there was pretty much one or two voices to create it. And so naturally it was going to be slightly curtailed. Where do you see the legislation moving? Stephen, you alluded to it that you, and I'm assuming a number of other people, have built a warehouse full of things, expecting there to be changes. But what are the opportunities? What does this open up? How does changing legislation change what Irish whiskey is compared to what we can taste today?
Who are you directing that to, Dan?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think James can probably speak the best to this. James is doing a wonderful job at the moment, championing Irish whiskey all over the world, in his role as head of the Irish Whiskey Association or chairman of the Irish Whiskey Association. But from my point of view, I suppose one of the great things about Irish whiskey is the consistent innovation and the creativity and the new flavors that are being created. You know, I've only been drinking Irish whiskey for maybe, I suppose, 12, 13 years, but from what was available on the market 13 years ago, by comparison, what's available now is just so much more exciting. And every day when you open your social media or you go to your news feed and you're seeing new releases from either new and up and coming distilleries or old and established distilleries, and they're just bringing new flavor profiles to Irish whiskey, it's just so incredibly exciting. It's incredibly tough on one's wallet to have to try and keep up and try and get out there and purchase all of these different bottles and try all of these different flavors. But Irish whiskey really at the moment, from what I can see, is just a hotbed for innovation and bringing new flavors to market and exciting drinkers worldwide. And I think that's probably why it's on such kind of an upward spiral and trajectory in terms of sales worldwide, because people are, you know, able to explore so many new flavors and so many new things.
And yeah, James, yeah. I did not. I should have known that. I think I did from a while ago. Yeah. So we just direct all the questions to you.
No, I think I was going to say thank you, Steve.
All the hard ones can go to James.
I'd just like to say that Ryan would like to say a few words. No, so the legislation, you have to think about sort of where Irish came from. So if you think Irish whiskey back in the and we went too far back, but if you go back to the 60s when you had the big consolidation, so as a survival mechanism, Powers, Paddy, Jameson, and Tullamore Dew, basically, and Bushmills all came to, you know, essentially become part of Irish Distillers, and you've got one company to sort of take on the world, because of the dominance of Scotch and the style. I was actually talking to Richard Burrows, who was the chairman of IDL for a while the other day, and he was telling me that it was 1972 when the style of Jameson that you know today, which was called modified pot, so modified pot still, that flavor profile was developed to appeal to America, and it was seen as the major innovation that was going to save Irish whiskey. And I suppose there are two things that were happening. One was it was sweet, smooth, easy. The triple distilling and the packaging stuff was all about triple distilled, twice as smooth, as a kind of as a counterpoint to Scotch. It was a way of keeping the industry alive. And so you've got what is a relatively modern phenomenon, if you think sort of post 1970, of Irish whiskey as this lighter style, when actually historically it probably was much richer, much more complex, because it was multi-grain distilling, it was pot still, well, certainly outside of Ulster it was pot still. Ulster was more single malt territory, and that the rules as they're written today were written in 2014. And if you think about who was making whiskey in 2014, it was the big guys plus John Teeling at Cooley, and you know, the file, you know, the single malt definition is probably kind of reflects Bushmills, because they were the only people other than Cooley making single malt. And the pot still definition is reflective of modern tradition, which is essentially Jameson and Jameson, Powers, and Paddy. So you've got this kind of, the room had certain voices in the room, and I personally don't think it was written with kind of malice of intent to try and stop other people getting in. I think it was just, this is the reflection of the way Irish whiskey is today. And Bord Bia were also kind of sort of promulgating that story around the world, that Irish whiskey was the light, smooth, easy one. And certainly when we came back, you know, it was like, don't use Irish spellings, nobody's interested. Don't use, don't use folk tales and all of that cultural piece, that doesn't work. And really peated whiskey is not a thing, so we shouldn't be doing it. If you think about where everyone is now, most of us, and Boann's the perfect example of this, where they've gone back into history and pulled up recipes that were all legitimate and historically made by different distilleries, most of which are illegal today. So, you know, we make a pot still, and Ryan's going to make a pot still. Ours has 20% oats in it, and 20% oats is not compliant with the technical file as it's written today. But our recipe is the recipe from Powers from 1910. So it's historically accurate, but it's not legal. So the whole industry is pretty well united around a new definition, which is up to 30% other grains. That piece of it is that there's some other sort of drafting stuff that needs to get tidied up, which is going through. Stephen said it's already in Europe. I think it's coming back to consultation in Ireland before it goes to Europe. But there's a process that the Ministry of Agriculture has to do here. Also, you've got this kind of slight complication, which is that Ireland, the Irish whiskey definition is 2 jurisdictions. So it's not just in the Republic, it's also in Northern Ireland, which is obviously UK government. So you've got to get the ministry here to work on it. You've got to get the Department of Agriculture in the UK to work on it at the same time, or the other way around, sorry. Create alignment, get all the consultation, get all of that piece together, and then go to Europe. So it's not an easy exercise for the ministries to do. But I think the fact that there's so much consistent viewpoint, which is all pretty well aligned around this, you'll see it happen. I don't think it'll happen quickly enough for all of us, but I think we'll all still do what we want to do anyway. And it will ultimately, the legislation will come to us at some point in the near future. I'm sorry, I took a bit of time there, but I think that's
I don't think Dan realized the can of worms he was opening.
No. I do. Legislation is not a topic that generally has a quick answer. But do you see there might be a period where there are a number of Irish whiskies that are called whiskey but not Irish whiskey?
Well, I can see. I mean, the thing is that if I want our pot still to come out, then I can't call it single pot still. I'm not sure that the language around pot still is that useful anyway. I personally think what we're talking about is multi-grain distilling, and that's not really what pot still says to people. Everyone sort of goes, well, single malt's made in a pot. So I think we've got a bit of work to do there anyway. And I always remember when Compass Box released a whiskey, I think it had a 30-year-old and a 3-year-old in it. And the SWA said, you can't release this you can't talk about the 30-year-old in it. You're not allowed to. And John Glazer released it it had 3 years old written on it, and it said this is not a luxury whiskey, and he sold it for 200 quid a bottle or something. So I think if whatever barriers people put up, there's some good minds around that will work out a way of telling a story that will get it to market, and that's all that matters, is that people get to taste it. Really,
I think multi-grain there that you said, James, is a great way of putting it. Like, I would love to see somebody like Ryan come into Irish whiskey with an outside perspective, having worked with multiple grains over there in America, and let him have the legislation change and just let him go wild on creating some of the most unique, unseen. Myself and James are working in distilleries where we're rehashing old vintage mash bills. I would love to see new mash bill recipes coming out from the likes of Ryan and the guys over in Connacht, and I would find that personally very, very exciting.
I mean, coming from abroad relative to Ireland, we thought of Irish whiskey in very specific terms, like what James was talking about, and I think what we're seeing now, and I speak as an outsider to this, I think, is that what that is being broken now, and it's being shattered and taken apart, and then it's going to get put back together over time, and we'll see what that ends up looking like. And it takes forever to move the legislation along, but the market will continue to move much, much more quickly. So the legislation, we will have to push that to match what it is that we're doing out there. And Dan, you said, is there going to be whiskeys that aren't Irish whiskeys? Yeah, I think that could happen. We could decide, look, we're not going to wait. for the legislation, and we're not going to call it Irish whiskey, and we're willing to take that hit or that perceived hit. But if people are looking for these products, we're going to give them the products. I don't think they're going to be too caught up in what they're called.
You can call, so unlike in Scotland, you have to call your whiskey whatever it's defined as. So if you make a single malt, you have to label it as single malt, or if you make a blend, it has to be labeled. In Irish whiskey, you have a slightly different legal construct, which is you can pick a lower level if you want. So if you look, there's, for all the blended Irish whiskey that's out there, we had the blended on the silky bottle originally, and we took it off because no one knew what it was. And so if you look at, Jameson is a blend, it doesn't say blended Irish whiskey. So you actually go for a lower standard, which is Irish whiskey, which is the catch-all. And so you can see these things coming to market just saying Irish whiskey, and then having a really rich story that brings alive that it's a style of pot still that's not legal, but you work on a way of telling the story. So you can still label it Irish whiskey, you just can't call it single pot still. So it's we have a certain degree of flexibility in the Irish construct that is slightly more flexible, I suppose, than Scotland. It also allows you to call whiskey not from your distillery by your distillery name, which is something
he's basically saying go mad, Ryan.
Yeah, Ryan, go mad, call it Irish whiskey, but don't label anything that's not from the distillery your distillery name. That's what
he's saying is take his produce and put it in your own name. That's what I just heard there.
No, not quite. Take any grain you like, have some fun. Let's see what it comes out like.
Yeah, just name it properly.
Yeah,
oh, is it?
What would be
so people know what it is.
Yeah.
It's the same with
transparency is all that really matters, I think, at the end of the day. I mean, I'm a whiskey consumer too. Yes, I make it, but I'm a consumer of whiskey, and that's the most important thing to me, is knowing what's in the bottle and who made it. If I know that, I'll drink almost anything at least once to find out about it. But transparency is everything.
Right. Next question is from Fee, and this one is going to be fiery, I believe. But please, I'll leave you to share it, Fee.
How do you feel about US whiskey calling themselves Irish whiskey?
Which brand in particular?
Oh yeah,
are you thinking of somebody in particular?
Oh yes. Well, no, there are quite a few of them. Yeah. They don't seem to understand that Irish American is not the same as Irish. And no, to me, it just feels dishonest. And they could say Irish American whiskey, I wouldn't have a problem. To say Irish whiskey when they're made in America doesn't feel right to me.
So there are two things I think that go on in 1976 in America, the SWA and the Scottish legislators managed to get in front of the TTB and get into the definition of Scotch whiskey under the TTB rules, which is not the GI, because the Americans don't recognize the GI. So in the TTB definition of what it is to be Scotch, there is a piece which says, Scotch whiskey has to be made in Scotland, aged in oak barrels, etc., etc. But it also has a second sentence which says you cannot allude to Scotland. So you can't use the words Glen, you can't use Glen this, Glen that, whatever. You can't allude to Scotland in a way by having pictures of bagpipers and all that kind of stuff. And the SWA got that in 1976. Irish whiskey doesn't have that protection. And in fact, I was over in the week before Paddy's Day this year, lobbying various senators and the TTB to try and get an addition of a line like that for Irish. Because what is happening at the moment is, I'm sure if we made a bourbon here, the bourbon guys would not be happy. And we need to respect the GIs. It's like, does port get made in Porto? Does Parma ham get made in Parma? All of these kind of definitions are important to protect artisan businesses and a cultural sort of identity. So it's important that Irish whiskey is protected, but it doesn't have the same protection as Scotch at the moment. And the Scotch have just been at it longer, the SWA, and they have a kind of further reaching, more defined kind of role in how they do it. And the Irish whiskey industry is really playing catch up to do it at the moment. because it wasn't an industry, it was one company. And so one company was doing it, whereas now you've got this whole legislative piece that's kind of evolving, but is probably, 20 years behind where the SWA is in terms of enforcing all of these things. So I personally would be, there's GIs there for a reason. Let's respect them. We'll respect yours. You should respect ours. And just because Irish whiskey is hot doesn't mean you should be passing off things as Irish. Because it's a hot category, because then you start to end up in sort of bubblegum vodka territory, and the whole thing becomes kind of a bit banal and a bit meaningless and what have you. But that would be my view.
Fee and James, I mean, it's the TTB doesn't have in the US doesn't have the lever to pull to enforce that. So the regulators in the States aren't even really able to do anything about it. So it then becomes incumbent on us as an industry to get that legislation changed or put that line in there that allows them to. And if we do, they will. That's how they work. They don't do it unless they have unless it's written down somewhere that they should. And yes, of course, the reciprocal, respect for everybody's GIs, if you will, is that would be the industry standard. That's what we would want to do. But at the end of the day, if people can put something on a label, they will. And until we change that, it will stay that way.
For sure.
Yeah, no, with all of that said, I actually do personally think that Irish whiskey as a category, through the work that James and other governmental bodies do here in the island of Ireland, is actually very well protected. It is very hard to go out there and actually, call something Irish whiskey that isn't Irish whiskey in 99% of countries worldwide. I think Mariah Carey's Black Irish is actually a liqueur. I don't think it's actually a whiskey.
It's a trade. It's a trademark issue as well. I think it's not. It was the fact that someone else owned the trademark before her.
So while it is frustrating when people do try and pass things off as Irish, I think we are doing a very good job as an industry in terms of protecting our beautiful Irish whiskey and its credibility worldwide. But it is definitely frustrating when people try copycat and pass off their own product as being Irish when it's not.
And it's just so weird as well. Why don't they just sing out the fact it's American whiskey, maybe made in the Irish way?
Because Irish style doesn't look good on a label.
See, I think that would work better than an American firm trying to say that they're Irish, because I would have thought Americans who don't claim to be so-called Irish American, I'm not a fan of the double barrels, would actually just want something that is straightforward American.
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the consumer. I don't think that they're paying that close of attention, honestly. Most of them.
And actually, you wouldn't be allowed to use style, so you couldn't make a Scotch. That's why you've got to have a definition for American single malt, because you can't say single malt in a Scottish style, because that's an allusion to Scotland. So that one sentence stops all of those things, and then the TTB can enforce it. And in fact, if the TTB can enforce it, they can stop guys wasting money on labels that are not going to be legal and all that kind of stuff. So it kind of, for all of us, it's useful. I mean, I got a label sent back to me by the TTB because I said it was finished in, what did I do? It was Red Silky, and I'd said it was finished in Rioja and Ribera, and I'd missed the word casks out. And they went, well, no, you didn't finish it in Rioja. You finished in Rioja casks. And, if I'd printed all those labels and sent it over to America and then it had got caught, it was an expensive mistake. So it has got a role, and it's a useful thing to do.
I'm going to go on to the next one. Toby, you had a question the other day in the test. Do you remember it? Because I'm scared of asking the next one.
Well, before that, I was just gonna ask James if the featuring of one of his bottles on a BBC TV show increased sales.
I don't know that it's increased sales, and I'm not sure that pre-kneecapping someone is.
Yeah, but
the moment I would have chosen for it. But the gin was on as well in the previous episode.
So I wonder if that had affected, sales or brand awareness.
I think it's certainly helped awareness. I'm not sure it's done anything specific for sales, but actually people who know Silky, I mean, actually
like
it was
me,
on.
You see it and you're like, whoa!
I get
BBC prime time.
It's on RTE tonight, so someone's actually WhatsApped me whilst we're doing this to say blue lights, and it's got a picture of the the painkillers and dark silky together. So
Great product placement.
Yeah.
I'm
assuming, did you have no input in that? It just was.
No, so we've got a few friends who are, and I mean they're kind of people we've met over the years, recent years, not sort of like longer friends, who have just loved what we do, generally the gin, and one of them happens to be involved in a production company, and she keeps saying to us, like, can we have some gin bottles, or can we have this? And to be honest, we just give her the bottles. I don't think about actually, you should insist on a scene where the person is visibly over the age of 25, no scenes of violence, no, all of this kind of stuff I never even thought about, which we might now. Although it's kind of fun to know that the actor who acted the IRA hitman who kneecapped the guy started following me on Twitter and started sending me messages, which was I wasn't sure whether to be flattered or not. So Anto is on my Twitter feed now.
I hope they were friendly messages.
They were very friendly. Yeah.
Your knees are safe.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. But it's kind of funny how those things play. I mean, I'm sure you'll see it with all of our brands will appear on something, and yeah. So we just weren't expecting it, and then suddenly it all lit. The Facebook and WhatsApp lit up with, "Oh my God, look!" And we go, "Oh my God, look!"
Next question.
So shall I go to my original question?
Yeah.
So I think it was along the lines of the fact that the Irish whiskey landscape has changed massively over recent years, and there's 30 plus distilleries in the island of Ireland. Is there enough room for all of you? And how do you sort of make yourself stand out from all the other brands that are available? Because you are all craft whiskey distillers. You aren't the big boys. You don't have the massive backing of these big organizations. So how do you make a name for yourself? How do you stand out in what is quite a busy landscape?
I think
how busy do you see the landscape? And how busy do you see the landscape being in 3 or 4 years' time, knowing that we're going through a quieter spell?
I think there's a few questions in there, and I might start with the first in relation to the quantity of distilleries, and do I see there being room for them? I think as an industry as a whole, I think we need multiple distilleries being hugely successful internationally for Irish whiskey to be taken seriously. If you look into the single malt category, the only distillery of note releasing high-end, high-aged single malts at the moment is Bushmills. Obviously, there's old Cooley stock out there in the market that an awful lot of people have. But when I travel internationally and I go visit places, I got a kind of a stark realization. I was in the #1 whiskey bar in Seoul in Korea, and I went in and I said, I can't wait to see what their Irish whiskey selection is going to be like, what brands have penetrated the market, how are we doing vis-a-vis Scotch, because in some markets when you go to the top whiskey bar, there's a selection of Irish. It's never as big as the Scotch, but there's a selection of Irish, and I might see James's brands, and I might see Ryan's brands, and so on and so forth. And I was sitting there, and there was about 20 different Scotch whiskey brands, all had their own kind of shelf on the back shelf, and a plinth of about kind of 10 to 15 whiskies in their portfolio. They were all really serious, really well appreciated whiskies worldwide. And over in the corner, there was a dusty bottle of Bushmills. And I just kind of went, it was a stark realization of, yes, we're one of the fastest growing spirit categories in the world. We're doing phenomenally well, where we're opening markets to bait the band. We're growing at a phenomenal rate. Jameson's success is obviously hugely successful. But I kind of looked at that and I said, right, if Boann is ever going to be taken seriously in Korea, the Irish whiskey category as a whole needs to be taken seriously in Korea, and not just Boann with our mixed mash bill single pot stills, Connacht whiskey with their single malt, James up in Sliabh with all of his peated whiskies. We need to all kind of rise as a category and basically go out there and penetrate these markets and sell quite well. So off the back of the Jameson sales, there's definitely a huge interest in Irish whiskey worldwide, and people want to try, right, I've tried Jameson, what's the next step into Irish whiskey? And kind of like people when they start on their peated journey, I think as they start taking that next step, they start going on a journey almost like James with his silky whiskies, and they start expanding and learning more about Irish whiskey and the different flavour profiles. So do I think there's room? I think there certainly is room. I think we have an awful lot of work to do, but I think if we're to be taken seriously as a category worldwide, we all need to rise together, and we all need to make sure that not just ourselves individually are doing well, but we work together to make sure that the category as a whole is doing well. So I think that answers your first question. I might leave the second and third parts of your question to the lads.
Ryan, do you want to?
Yeah, go on, Ryan. Your turn.
Yeah, no, it's all right. I definitely think there's still plenty of room. Plenty of room. I mean, the way we think about it, at least the way I think about it, is the way that we stay successful is by starting by owning our own backyards. If we haven't done that, if we haven't represented ourselves locally, then when we go out, there's nothing there to lift us up, nothing there to support us. That crowd that keeps us going. I think that's really critical. I mean, I can't imagine trying to start a brand that is just trying to sell whiskey overseas that is called Irish whiskey. I don't think there's a long play there. I think there might be a quick cash grab there, and there might be a good way to make some money. Maybe there's a way to start a brand and then build a brand, but I think you've got to do kind of what this crowd here is doing, is start by having a really quality product. The juice is number one. It has to be there. It's table stakes. If you don't have it, it doesn't work long term. And then you start talking about, where can I spend the money to make it grow? Where do I put the marketing dollars? And you got to have that strong base to be able to move forward.
And I think what Ryan's saying is absolutely right. I mean, you're kind of, because you're cash strapped a lot of the time, it's going to pick your battles and where you're going to fight. And if the first part of the question, I think, is 50 distilleries too many? The answer is probably no, because the island's got enough space to put 50 different distilleries on with 50 different propositions if we all do something different. So I think 50 is probably a good number, and you'll probably see some fall away and you'll see some others come in. Is there space in terms of the absolute opportunity? There's just, none of us are big enough. So if you think about, the predicted numbers that Irish whiskey is going to double again before 2030, say, then the absolute scale of all the distilleries that have gone in is too small. And so you'll end up having to, the sourcing distilleries is, like GND, West Cork, and what have you, I think are really key to helping that go forward, because, I'm not sure of the capacity of Boann, but, we're sort of 500,000 litres. I would say a really good sustainable size for a distillery is somewhere between 1 million and 1.2 if you're going to build a 100,000 case brand in 10 years time, 15 years time. That's the kind of order you need to be looking at. And there isn't the number of distilleries of that size in Ireland, you can count on the fingers of one hand. So capacity wise, we've got an issue anyway. And overall, kind of 50 feels like a sort of sensible number. And if you think about those 50, 20 of them are genuinely boutique. They're probably a 300 litre stills or something like that, doing incredibly innovative things. But actually, in terms of physical output, they're making a barrel a week, or maybe a barrel every 3 days or something. So that's not going to move the needle in terms of capacity for the industry. So I think that's a challenge. I think the other bit is kind of being very clear about your identity, and in here you've got 3 very specific identities tonight, which are doing quite different things. Ours is smoky, and so we think about the business in this idea of like where to play Irish spirits globally. We're not really playing in Ireland as well. We spend time in the northwest where we live. We spend a bit of time in Belfast and Derry, and a little bit of time in Dublin. Frankly, Ireland is a really complicated market to try and sell in, so we spend more time internationally than we do here. But then when you look at how do you win within that, for us, it is about really clear, distinctive liquids, and then a highly differentiated story. So our distinctive liquid, 100% of it smoky, degrees of smoke, profound and challenging. I'm hoping that we'll redefine the way people look at Irish whiskey forever. But our differentiated story is built on the origin story, which is taking an illicit heritage and making it modern, Our sense of place is quite profound. Donegal, I'm sure down in Ballina, the guys would say their place is pretty, is special and unique, and in a very different way. But this place is wild and raw and contrarian, and we'll leverage that. And I think that's the bit where you'll see brands evolving now, much clearer identities. Instead of trying to be all things to all people, they'll become very much clearer around who they appeal to and who they don't. Because there's no point in us trying to be, a Me Too Jameson. We haven't got the scale economies. We can't play the game. We can't do it as well as them. So we need to do something different. So we're all counter-positioned ultimately to some degree. And it's about how comfortable you are leaning into that. So I think you'll see much stronger kind of counter-position brand identities. And I think the opportunity is there. So providing you've got the capital to sort of weather the downturn in the world that's there right now, and the cost of doing business, because distilleries are just brutally expensive. If you can weather that, then the businesses become machines that create opportunity for forever if you get them right.
And on that, I'm going to suggest that we end, because we have overrun slightly, partly because you are quite interesting to chat to and listen to. So, but I understand that you also have to have some sleep at some point, because you are quite busy.
What's that? I don't know.
Yeah. But thank you so much for sharing your time, your passion, your knowledge, your liquid with us, to hopefully everyone in the audience feels that they have both learned and progressed their journey in Irish whiskey. It's something that we haven't seen the full wave of it coming to the UK. That's coming, but that's yes, we have 50 distilleries, but as they start coming of age, we'll get more and more coming to us. So I hope for everyone in the audience, you have had an opportunity to explore further, learn for the first time, gather more information, hopefully find things that you want to delve further into. Everyone we've had today has a different style completely. So it's not that you have to say, I like Irish whiskey, but what the aim of this is to show, like we have with Scotch, like we have with our club bottles, there's different styles out there, and you find your favorite that you want to explore further. Because I would say we've had 6 fantastic drams, all of which actually, at the moment, I'm not. What I've been doing is I've been blending your individual stuff together, guys. I've been having a great time in the background. I like all of what you do, but I understand for others that there will be directions you want to go in, and I really hope you have had that opportunity to go, yes, this is an area we need to explore further. Dan, why the hell haven't you done a club bottle from Ireland yet? I want to explore this a lot more. Help me out with this. And I'll do my best. But more than that, thank you, Ryan, Stephen, James, Toby and Fee, for giving us your time and just being your great selves.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And if any of you are ever at a whiskey event and either of these fine gentlemen are there, make sure you plan on spending a good chunk of time there. Because I can guarantee you, when you don't plan on it, you're going to spend that time there anyway. So just expect that you're going to stay there. There is a lot of great stuff coming from these 3 distilleries and a number of others in Ireland, but these 3 in particular is a reason we picked them. And I hope you all agree that with me that these are fantastic people creating great whiskey. And on that, I think I should probably